Chapter 626. Jiang Pengji's unreasonable actions caused the Red Lotus group to panic. The faces of the cult's higher-ups were as dark as if their parents had died. They knew that they were the target of Jiang Pengji's expedition, but they still prayed in their hearts that she was going to find trouble with someone else. As time passed, the information sent back by the informants decreased. The higher-ups began to feel restless. The reason why I called everyone here today is to discuss countermeasures. The chief has not slept well for many days because of this matter. As the chief's right-hand men, we should share the chief's burdens and solve his problems. I wonder if everyone has any good countermeasures? He was a handsome and refined young scholar. He looked reserved and shy, but he was full of bad ideas. Before the troubled times, he was a wastrel who cheated and fooled around with widows all day long. Taking advantage of the earthquake in Shangjing, he rose to become a high-ranking member of the Red Lotus group. He was trusted by the sect leader, and he often used the sect leader's authority as a token of his authority to bully his followers. An Shui was among the crowd. With Jiang Pengji's financial and material assistance, An Shui's plan to win over the hearts of the people went even more smoothly. How could a group of illiterate, ignorant people from the wilderness be a match for An Shui, who had a glib tongue? Even if they were wary at first, after being tricked by An Shui, they wished they could dig out their hearts and be on his good side. Therefore, An Shui rose from a small leader to a leader who was neither too big nor too small. He was qualified to participate in such a meeting. Just as Wei Ci ridiculed, An Shui's acting skills were superb. In the era of live streaming, winning an Oscar would be a piece of cake. He wanted Jiang Pengji to win more than anyone else, so he worked harder than anyone else. If Jiang Pengji won, the chips that An Shui had bet on her would increase. Only then would they have value. Faced with the questions of the higher-ups, the group of illiterate boorish men looked at each other in dismay. Wasn't it a joke to ask them to come up with a plan? The atmosphere at the scene was awkward. The scholar seemed to realize this as well. His cheeks turned slightly red, and a hint of embarrassment appeared on his face. He would only ask a group of ignorant boorish men if there was something wrong with his brain. What good ideas could a group of guys with only muscles for brains have? Just as he was thinking about how to bring the topic back and ease the atmosphere, An Shui stepped forward. Compared to those brawny and boorish men who didn't wash for 10 days to half a month, An Shui, this refined and noble person, was clearly different. An Shui, who stood out like a crane in a flock of chickens, stepped forward and said, "This lowly one is willing to contribute his meager strength to the cause of sect master's hegemony." The scholar's eyes lit up. He could smell the scent of his own kind. He quickly asked, "What's your name?" An Shui revealed his background, and he did not hide his real name. After all, with the level of the Red Lotus group, it was destined that they would not know who An Shui was. "Did you just say that you have an idea?" The scholar asked in a genteel manner, addressing An Shui by his courtesy name. "Duoshi, tell me quickly. 1 cannot outsmart 2, and 2 cannot outsmart 3. As the strategist that the leader of the Red Lotus group relied heavily on, the scholar's ups and downs were still manageable for ordinary people, but when faced with a strong enemy like Jiang Pengji, his limited knowledge seemed to be stretched thin. Therefore, in order to maintain the supreme leader's trust, he called for this meeting. It was better to have a group of people think of a solution than him alone. Seeing An Shui, the scholar felt that he saw hope. An Shui's appearance was secondary. The key was his refined and noble aura. At a glance, one could tell that he had a good upbringing and was literate. The scholar stubbornly believed that a scholar was definitely smarter than a boorish man. An Shui deliberated for a moment, then said unhurriedly, "In my opinion, now is not the time to be anxious." The scholar's brows furrowed, and he was a little displeased. If he was not anxious now, should he wait until a knife was held to his neck? However, it was rare to find a scholar, so the scholar tolerated it. "Why do you say that?" And Shui straightened his chest and said energetically, I heard that the Emperor of Dongqing has issued an edict to rescue the Emperor, ordering the heroes of the world to go rescue the Emperor. This Lu Shi controls Fengyi County and Shangyang County, and has 30,000 to 40,000 troops. Naturally, he will also go rescue the Emperor. If this person does not go, he will be a traitor, and all the heroes of the world will have the right to punish him. Therefore, Lu Shi must go rescue the Emperor. The scholar was surprised for a moment, and a new expression appeared on his face. Why hadn't he thought of this? He looked as if he had been inspired and analyzed the situation. So, Lu Shi did not mobilize his troops to attack us, but to go south to rescue the Emperor? Even a dedicated veteran like An Shui felt that he could not continue acting in the face of the naive scholar. Who gave the Red Lotus leader the courage to let such an idiot be a military counselor? His brain must have been kicked by a donkey. If Lu Shi mobilized his troops to rescue the Emperor, how could he not have even prepared for the new year? According to the current situation in Dongqing, which major force would take the half-dead Dongqing royal family seriously? Because the scholar was the brain of the Red Lotus group and played the role of a counselor, An Shui had to give him face. Therefore, he said, there is such a possibility. The scholar was just about to breathe a sigh of relief. As long as they were not fighting the Red Lotus group, however, An Shui added another sentence. However, after careful consideration, I fear that Lu Shi's intentions are not with us, but with the Red Lotus group. The scholar had just breathed a sigh of relief, but he was once again worried. What? An Shui smiled. With a confident demeanor, he said, Lu Shi has already stabilized Fengyi County and took over Shangyang County in the winter. Everyone knew what the situation was like in Shangyang County. My group and the Tsing-Yi army have attacked repeatedly, but we have not been able to conquer it. In other words, Lu Shi has taken over Shangyang County, and his strength is still intact. With the troops from Shangyang County and Fengyi County, this person's power is at its peak. If I were Lu Shi, I would naturally hope to take advantage of this momentum and take down Qingda County in one go, so that I can unify Wanzhou. There were only 6 states in Dongqing, and Lu Shi alone occupied one. After hearing this, the scholar felt that it made sense. However, if he had been smarter, he would have realized that An Shui was only fooling him. An Shui spoke a lot, and it seemed to make sense, but in reality, it was useless. It was mostly nonsense. The scholar was impressed by An Shui's intelligence, but he was afraid that if he did not perform as well as An Shui, it would affect his prestige in the Red Lotus group. Therefore, the scholar invited An Shui to the back hall for a detailed discussion. As soon as they sat down, the scholar hurriedly asked, Duo Shi, why did you say that you were in no hurry? An Shui frowned secretly. He did not like people calling him by his courtesy name. However, he did not express this negative and irritated emotion. Instead, he looked excited, as if he was about to be put in an important position. Chapter 627. When the scholar heard this, his expression turned anxious. Isn't Lu Shi a little too greedy? He wants to rescue the Emperor and attack our sect at the same time? He's not afraid of choking to death. An Shui was speechless again. Jiang Pengji and the Red Lotus group were enemies. If she did not take advantage of his weakness, would she love him with motherly love? An Shui said, Don't be impatient, don't be impatient. I said there's no need to be anxious precisely because Lu Shi is too greedy. He wants to have the best of both worlds, so he must expand the results of the battle as quickly as possible. They can't afford to delay a battle if they follow the rules. The scholar was fascinated. He pricked up his ears for fear of missing a word. In this situation, Lu Shi can only concentrate his forces to attack one place. Our sect has many people and countless followers. Why would we be afraid of Lu Shi's mere tens of thousands of troops? If he wants to attack by force, we will concentrate our forces and delay them. After a long time, he will naturally retreat. The scholar nodded as he listened, then asked a stupid question. Why would he retreat voluntarily? And Chui choked. He really did not want to answer such a stupid question. Because it's to rescue the emperor. Lu Shi's time cannot be delayed. The scholar nodded his head in agreement. He finally understood. In other words, we just need to delay him. As long as they delayed him, Lu Shi would retreat without a fight. And Chui agreed, that's exactly what I mean. The scholar asked again, but how do we know where Lu Shi will attack? Chengde County's terrain is not complicated, but it is vast. It is troublesome and a waste of time to send reinforcements. Duo Shi, where do you think Lu Shi will concentrate his forces to attack? And Chui lowered his eyes. With such a pig brain as a military advisor, it was no wonder that they could not suppress the Tsing-Yi army. The Red Lotus group had many people, but their brains were too stupid. This is why I said there's no need to be anxious. And Chui looked like he was giving advice. He smiled and said, we wait for Lu Shi's next move. Lu Shi is fighting a long-distance battle, while we are defending. There are flat official roads in the county. We can move troops much faster than them. Instead of worrying and panicking now and making the people panic, it is better to sit on the fishing platform and wait for Lu Shi to come to us. No matter where he attacks, as long as we keep an eye on him, no matter how he attacks, we will be able to gain the upper hand. And Chui had given the Red Lotus group a solid blow, so much so that the scholar's bones went limp and his mentality swelled to the heavens. When the scholar heard this, his eyes lit up. He held Anne's hands and called her his confidant. And Chui chuckled. He would never befriend a pig. His expression was cold. The scholar asked a few more stupid questions in detail, and Chui answered them in detail, without any intention of hiding anything. The scholar was very satisfied with their conversation. He patted Chui's shoulder. You've done well. You've done a great service this time. I'll definitely put in a good word for you in front of the cult master. And Chui revealed an expression of uncontrollable ecstasy on his face, but he pretended to be reserved and humbly declined. However, according to his preliminary test of the scholar, this person would not recommend him to the Red Lotus group's leader. Instead, he would hide him. Why? The Red Lotus group did not need two equally smart strategists. If Chui was too smart and capable, it would make the scholar seem too stupid and useless. And Chui was well aware of this little trick to suppress him. Anyway, he did not need the Red Lotus group's attention. Whether he put in a good word for him or not, it did not mean much to him. The Red Lotus group's leader trusted the scholar more, and Chui could not match this trust in a short period of time. As 007 that Jiangpengji had planted, Chui needed the Red Lotus group's leader to believe his words without a doubt. The scholar was the best mouthpiece. As expected, the scholar turned around and reported to the Red Lotus group's leader. He modified Chui's words and shifted them to his own results, not mentioning Chui's existence at all. The Red Lotus group's leader was a stocky man who was less than 5 feet tall. His face was full of pockmarks, and to hide his ugliness, he kept a full beard. He and the scholar were from the same hometown. Before the uprising, they were on good terms. After the uprising, he trusted the scholar. He pinched his beard and muttered to himself for a while. "We'll do as you say. I want to see what Lu Shi is capable of to dare offend a god." As mentioned before, the Tsing-Yi army were bandits, and the Red Lotus group were bandits with faith. This leader claimed to be the incarnation of a god who descended to save the people. But in reality, before he became the incarnation of a god, he was just a random doctor who had studied medicine for a few years. By chance, he had obtained a copy of the sect's doctrine that had been passed down during the chaotic times of the 16 kingdoms. After reading it, he felt that it made sense and spread it everywhere. However, the ancient books did not specify which sect it was, so he simply named it after his hometown, Red Lotus District. After a few years, he had accumulated a group of believers in his hometown, Red Lotus District, which laid the foundation for the uprising that followed. Coincidentally, there was an earthquake in Shangjing. The royal family moved the capital, disregarding the lives of the people. He simply raised the doctrine and led his followers in rebellion. If the Red Lotus group had been lucky and had not been stopped by the Tsing-Yi army, it was estimated that the Red Lotus group would have spread throughout the north. It was a pity that luck was not on their side. The Tsing-Yi army suddenly emerged as a new force, and they fought too fiercely with the Red Lotus group in the north. In the end, no one could do anything to the other, and no one could develop and grow stronger. Instead, it benefited Jiang Pengji. Because of his advice, the scholar received a large reward. This also strengthened his desire to continue suppressing and shui. However, in order to maintain such a high standard of intelligence, he still needed An Shui to be his gunman. In order to further gain the scholar's trust, An Shui then helped him solve two more problems. In the eyes of the Red Lotus group, their military counselor seemed to have turned on a cheat code. His body shone even more brightly. At the same time, Jiang Pengji had already made preparations for the expedition. The allocated rations were abundant, and the selected soldiers were also elites. Even though they stood in the cold wind, their postures were still tall and straight. Jiang Pengji stepped onto the platform and officially announced that she would be the commander-in-chief of the vanguard battalion. This time, Li Yun was also promoted from deputy captain to captain. He led the right wing and coordinated with the vanguard battalion and the middle troops. This time, Meng Hun stayed behind to look after the home. Luo Yu was responsible for the transportation of rations in the rear and shouldered various logistical matters. Dian Yen was appointed deputy captain of the vanguard battalion and charged forward with Jiang Pengji. The women's battalion led by Jiang Nongqin was the vanguard to support the vanguard battalion's offensive tactics. As for the strategists who would follow the army, Jiang Pengji considered the few people under her command and finally chose Yang Si. Qiguan Rang would oversee the middle troops, Wei Ci and Su Ku would stay behind to look after the home, and Yang Si would follow the army into battle. When Yang Si learned of the results, he could not help but be speechless and gasp in surprise. "I really don't know if your lord is magnanimous or broad-minded. She even dares to put someone in an important position who has yet to surrender." Wei Ci laughed and said, "Naturally, the Lord trusts the people she dares to use. What's more, you're the one who came up with the plan for the surprise attack this time. If I don't bring you along, who will I bring along? It's just that. I heard that the mountain road is treacherous. Jing Rong, you must be careful." Yang Si's face darkened, like the ashes at the bottom of a pot. Chapter 628. The flags fluttered in the wind, and the howling cold wind rolled up the snow and ice. As a pregnant woman, White was treated like a little princess. The warhorse that accompanied them to the battle this time was replaced by Little White. The situation on the mountain road had been investigated in advance. Large-scale goods could not pass through, and the road was rugged and steep. The troops could only go into battle lightly. Jiang Pengji said, "Let's take down that small town first. The scouts that we send out should be quick-witted. Report back immediately if anything happens." Although it was a surprise attack, Jiang Pengji did not intend to be secretive. She brought a total of 10,000 troops and horses for this battle. The remaining 10,000 and the new recruits were left behind to guard the home. Apart from guarding the home, they were also responsible for the safety of the logistics and the supply route. If the supply route was cut off, the war could not be fought at all. Under normal circumstances, Jiang Pengji could take more people with her. However, the situation in Shangyang County had not been stabilized, so she could not transfer too many troops. She did not want to receive news that her home base had been destroyed after she had just won a great victory at the front line. Little White was gentle and reserved in front of Jiang Pengji in white, but it was like a different horse on the battlefield. Which man did not like a good horse? During the march, Yang Si looked at Little White with envy. Little White seemed to sense his gaze and snorted in his direction. Yang Si, who seemed to be despised by a horse, was speechless. The army set off. Other than the crunching of the snow, the howling wind, and the breathing of the people, there was no other movement in the air. Jiang Pengji was at ease. The march was rather boring, so she simply turned on the streaming room. In an instant, the audience in another dimension received a notification that they had to take advantage of their high hand speed. The 150,000 live stream slots were filled in an instant. Through the camera in the streaming room, the audience could clearly see the scene in front of the camera. It was several times clearer than the popular 1080p. The sky was dark, and the snow was blowing. The color under the sky was slightly gray. Jiang Pengji was dressed in a red and white military uniform, which made her look handsome and heroic. Her figure, outlined by the armor, looked slender and well-proportioned. She did not look bloated or clumsy at all. The audience in the streaming room had long been used to her wide-sleeved scholarly or rough image. Now that she was dressed in armor and riding on a tall horse, she looked like a valiant young general who had walked out of a painting. They immediately howled like wolves and the bullet screen whistled. Guangguan Jujiu, oh, 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 look what I caught, a handsome streamer. Red and white military uniform, the one on a snow-white horse. She stands in the wind and snow. She's like a goddess in my dreams. Streamer, do you still need a salted fish to warm your bed? Zai Zhizhou, pay. With salted fish warming the bed, wasn't he afraid that the bed would be filled with the smell of fish? I'm different. Host, look at me. I just used shampoo and washed myself from head to toe. I'm clean and I even have a nice fragrance when I walk. Let me warm the bed. I promise the bed won't smell like fish. Goddess Pengji, stop talking. My husband is here. He's wearing red clothes and silver armor, and he's riding a big horse. He looks exactly like the streamer. That's enough. I'm going to open the door for my dear husband. We're going to do some he exercises together at night. Jia wa QQ, you're all hysterical. No matter how handsome the streamer is, she's still a woman. Streamer Zheng Shangwo, mediocre person, do you know what love at first sight feels like? The moment I saw the streamer's figure, I decided that I wanted to be gay for her. Even if I had to bend into a mosquito coil, I'd be willing. She's only my husband. Streamer Shangwo, pay. What's the big deal about being gay for the streamer? I'm even willing to straighten myself for the streamer. Jiang Pengji was secretly surprised to see the quarrel between the wives in the streaming room. This group of capricious fairies had a war of words some time ago over which of her counselors was the husband of the entire nation. What about now? With the streamer as their new love, they had forgotten about their old love. As the husband that 150,000 idle viewers were fighting over, Jiang Pengji found the boring military journey interesting. They stopped to rest midway. Jiang Pengji handed her portion of meat soup to Yang Si. Drink this to warm up. There are still a few days to the destination. Don't tire yourself out. Although Yang Si was a counselor, he belonged to the vanguard battalion. He had to ride a horse to withstand the wind and snow during the march. After a few hours, not only was the inner side of his thighs in pain from the abrasion, but his cheeks were also flushed red from the biting cold wind. He could barely feel them. He wore a circle-shaped scarf and a pair of wool gloves that Li Yun, the little angel, had made out of friendship. He was so cold that his shoulders were shivering. Although the literati of this era also practiced martial arts, their physiques were still much weaker than those of warriors. Trembling, he took the ceramic bowl that Jiang Pengji handed to him. He did not mind the heat and gulped it down in one gulp. The heat spread to his limbs and bones. Heaving a long and comfortable sigh, Yang Si let go of his thoughts. He suddenly thought of something and teased her. Such lousy weather, it's really cold. Fortunately, it's me. If it were Zixiao, he'd probably fall sick from the wind. Jiang Pengji casually replied, I know. His body hasn't recovered yet. I won't let him follow the army in this season. Yang Si was stunned after hearing that. He carefully pondered over the deeper meaning of her words. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. Did Lu Shi mean that, if the season was better, the person who followed the army would not be him but Wei Ci? That shouldn't be the case, right? Jiang Pengji smiled and said, yes, it's exactly what you're thinking. Yang Si was speechless. He really wanted to smash the ceramic bowl in his hand, along with the meat soup inside, onto Jiang Pengji's forehead. What did he do wrong in his previous life to offend Wei Ci and Jiang Pengji? Did he have to be mocked by them in this life? Sob, sob, sob. He felt wronged. If he and Jiang Pengji fell out, it was definitely because she and Wei Ci's mouths were too vicious. Jiang Pengji added with a smile to salvage Yang Si's emotional state, which was on the verge of a breakdown. Of course, Zixiao's health is one aspect. The other aspect is that Jing Rong is outstanding and shouldn't be neglected. Look, how artistic she was with her words. It was obvious that she spared no effort to exploit Yang Si's labor and used the casual worker like a mule. In Jiang Pengji's words, it was said that she relied on and trusted Yang Si and could not bear for his talents to be buried. If it were a fool, he would probably be coaxed to tears. Obviously, Yang Si was not a fool, but he had no way to refute. Once again, he sighed with emotion. He had really boarded a pirate ship. If time could be reversed, Yang Si would definitely cling to Huang Song's thigh and never step into Fengyi County. Yang Si laughed coldly. In that case, I have to thank you for thinking highly of me and be deeply grateful. Sooner or later, he had to accept his fate. Yang Si simply changed the way he addressed her. He looked like he had given up. Jiang Pengji seemed to not notice the change in how Yang Si addressed her. Her attitude was natural. There's no need to be deeply grateful, but I will continue to rely on you. The subtext was, continue to work overtime after returning from the war. I think very highly of you. Yang Si looked at the ceramic bowl in his hand. There was still half of the delicious meat soup left. Should he smash the bowl on Jiang Pengji's forehead when she was unprepared, or should he drink it himself? Chapter 629. There was a small town near the border between Jinmen County and Fenghu County. This small town used to be a small village deep in the mountains. During the chaotic times of the 16 Kingdoms, a mountain road was built here to connect the two counties. Commercial trade was frequent, and this place became a good place for merchants to stop and rest. Slowly, it became a small town with a large population. In the middle of the Great Xia dynasty, the government recruited corvée laborers to build the official road. The official road was flat and wide. In contrast, the mountain road was craggy and narrow, full of bumps and bumps. Soon, the mountain road was abandoned, and the popularity that had gathered because of the mountain road also dissipated. Now, this small city had been forcefully occupied by the Red Lotus Group and had become their outpost. Jiang Pengji led the troops closer. Along the way, they discovered several enemy scouts, but they were all killed by the vanguard battalion. However, the Red Lotus Group had developed from the commoners at the bottom of society. If they really wanted to spy on the situation, it would be impossible to guard against them. When Jiang Pengji was only an hour away from the small town, the news reached the hinterlands of the Red Lotus Group. After the leader of the Red Lotus group heard this, he summoned his trusted aide, the scholar, and asked about the plan. The scholar was already used to finding Shui to be his gunman. On the surface, he appeased the cult leader, but in his heart, he memorized the information. This matter is quite suspicious. Lu Shi is a treacherous and cunning person. I'm afraid there's something fishy going on. The scholar pretended to be profound as he tried to think of a way to coax the Red Lotus group leader. Group leader, allow me to go back and think about this. I will definitely give you an answer in 4 hours at most. As soon as the leader of the Red Lotus group agreed, the scholar hurriedly went back to seek help from Shui. Shui had a script. When he learned that Jiang Pengji would attack the small town according to the original plan, he was overjoyed. He showed a serious expression and pretended to be suspicious. What's so special about that small city? Why did Lu Shi attack that place? The scholar echoed, yes, that place is very creepy. There are ferocious beasts everywhere. Is Lu Shi trying to enter the mountain to feed the mosquitoes? In a war, one should not attack on the main road. They did not play their cards according to common sense. Shui rubbed his forehead with his hand, looking like he had a headache. This was not an act. He really had a headache. What a pig-like teammate. The Red Lotus group wanted to play with Jiang Pengji with their meager skills? Go to bed and sleep, everything is possible in your dreams. The scholar did not give Shui a way out. He could only improvise and continue acting out the script. Shui thought for a long time. Finally, he had an idea and realized that the commotion had scared the scholar. I've got it. Shui's face was filled with uncontrollable joy. He said, that small town is located near Jinmen County and Fenghu County. Lu Shi wants to use a surprise attack on one of the counties. However, the scholar's intelligence couldn't keep up with the pace. He even asked Shui stupidly, is that so? But that place is full of mountains. Who knows how much time it will take to climb over them? If you want to fight a fast-paced attack, it would be more reliable to take the main road. Shui, no, this script is too difficult to act. Shui said, no, I heard that there is a mountain path there that has been unused for many years. It connects Jinmen County and Fenghu County. Scholar. His first reaction was to immediately send people to block the mountain path, but Shui dampened his enthusiasm. There's not enough time. I reckon that the small city has already been conquered by now. Moreover, there is more than one exit on the mountain path. We can't block it at all. We might even be surrounded by them. This strategy is too risky. The scholar seemed to have grabbed onto the last piece of driftwood. He hurriedly said, please give me a good strategy, master. Previously, the scholar had bossed Shui around, but now he called him master. Shui wasn't angry. He put on a professional act and said, although there are several exits on the mountain path, it only connects Jinmen County and Fenghu County. There's no doubt about this. According to the original plan, we only need to send a large number of troops to stall for time. When they can't help but retreat, we'll outflank them from behind and first block their retreat on the mountain path. In this way, we'll be able to catch a turtle in a jar and achieve a complete victory. Listening to Shui describe the blueprint, the scholar's anxious and helpless little heart calmed down. Master, you're very talented. I'll definitely put in a good word for you in front of the chief. When the time comes, a high position and generous salary will be just around the corner. Some people could speak, such as Jiang Pengji. Some people couldn't speak and thought they were very good at it, such as this scholar. If Shui wasn't acting, he would have been so angry at this person's words that he would have long since ascended to heaven. The scholar first boasted about Shui, then asked carefully, in your opinion, which county will Lu Shi focus on attacking? Since the mountain path connected Fenghu County and Jinmen County, Lu Shi's goal should be one of these two counties. A 50% chance, which one was it? And Shui thought about the contents of the script and said, I've carefully thought about the situation on that mountain path. The mountain path to Jinmen County is too long. If a surprise attack is launched, I don't know how much physical strength it will take, and the marching time is too long. The mountain path to Fenghu County is relatively short, and the distance is only half that of Jinmen County. Comparing the two, I conclude that Lu Shi's target must be Fenghu County. The scholar nodded as he listened. Listening to Shui's words was better than reading for 10 years. After a while, he said with emotion, this Lu Shi is really cunning and black-hearted. Although I'm a native of Qingda County, I didn't know that there was an abandoned mountain path there. It's too remote. If you weren't so talented and familiar with the geography, Lu Shi might have really succeeded. But now, we'll beat him at his own game. We'll capture Lu Shi alive and let him suffer heavy casualties. And Shui's lips revealed a mysterious smile. The scholar also revealed a smile of tacit understanding. The scholar comforted Shui and turned to claim credit. He copied Shui's words almost verbatim and suggested to the Red Lotus group leader. The opportunity doesn't come again. If we can capture Lu Shi now, we will have no more worries. Group leader, for the sake of our grand plan, we must be ruthless. The Red Lotus group leader asked him, tell me your opinion. The scholar's expression was slightly ferocious. His tone was light, but his thoughts were very vicious. He said, Group leader, why don't we transfer the people from Jinmen County to Fenghu County? When Lu Shi can't attack them, we can send people to attack the small town when he's unprepared. Then, we can surround the mountain path from behind and catch them like a turtle in a jar. It would be best if we can capture Lu Shi alive. If that doesn't work, we can surround them and slowly torture them to death. Under the shadows, the scholar's face appeared very cold. The Red Lotus group leader thought about it and felt that this was a brilliant plan. Military counselor, you have a brilliant plan. This time, we must make sure that Lu Shi doesn't return. Although the small town was the Red Lotus group's sentry post, there weren't many people inside. There were only a few hundred scattered people. They couldn't even organize an effective defense. The highest point of the city wall was only slightly more than 10 feet. Who could be stopped by such a small height? Jiang Pengji held a long spear in her hand and mounted a horse to attack. Little White's strength in trampling people was no less than White's. With a single hoof, the sternum was shattered. She rushed to the front. Yang Xi's eyelids twitched as he watched, afraid that she would be shot by a stray arrow. Chapter 630. Jiang Pengji was dressed in red and silver armor. She was an obvious target in the snow. If the Red Lotus group didn't target her, who else would they target? But for Jiang Pengji, the sparse rain of arrows seemed to have slowed down by dozens of times. She wasn't crippled. Why couldn't she dodge? Realizing that Jiang Pengji was being targeted by arrows, Yang Xi was so frightened that he almost fell off his horse. However, it turned out that Wei Ci was right. Jiang Pengji fought him with 2 legs, 1 hand, and 4 fingers. She could crush Yang Xi to death with 1 finger. Watching Jiang Pengji dance the long spear in her hand vigorously, the dense shadows of the spear almost turning into a shield wall. Arrows were deflected by her. Yang Xi's emotions went up and down as he watched. It was as if he was on a roller coaster. Little White galloped forward. As a top-grade steed, it had extremely strong explosive power and endurance. Soon, it left the rest of its kind behind. It galloped as fast as silver lightning. The walls of the small city were quickly approaching. Jiang Pengji's target was too obvious. She alone attracted almost all the firepower. Little White galloped in the rain of arrows with her on its back. Occasionally, 1 or 2 tricky arrows approached, but Little White could quickly change direction to avoid them. Such a scene almost caused an uproar in the live stream. Their perspective was relatively special. It was similar to a camera hanging above Jiang Pengji's head. As the audience, they could adjust the angle of the camera 360 degrees. They could even zoom in and out. This time, the camera gave them a bird's-eye view. Not only could they see Jiang Pengji's back view as she galloped away, but they could also see the way she shot down the arrows. She was so fast that she left afterimages. Goddess Pengji, hubby, hubby, are you riding a tall white horse to marry me? Don't worry, I'll go downstairs and open the door for you. College entrance examination goes smoothly, I can't take it anymore. She's so cool. Can I dump the man next to me and marry the streamer? Good luck tomorrow, love rival. Let's fight. In order not to affect her mood, Jiang Pengji had long turned off the bullet screen in the live stream. No matter how much the idle audience howled, she couldn't see them for the time being. Relying on Little White's pace, Jiang Pengji easily rushed to the bottom of the city gate. The city wall was only 6 or 7 meters high. How could it stop the combination of Jiang Pengji and Little White? About 30 meters away from the city wall, Jiang Pengji put away her long spear, turned sideways, and bent over to avoid the arrows. She raised her hand to draw her longbow and a few arrows. Without looking, she pulled the bowstring to the fullest with her right hand and a few arrows flew out. The dull sound of a sharp weapon piercing through flesh could be heard. Several splatters of blood bloomed. The soldiers of the vanguard battalion had also caught up to support Jiang Pengji. In less than a breath's time, she once again shot out several arrows. Every arrow that left the bowstring would definitely take a life. By the time she had shot 4 waves of arrows, Little White had already braked its hooves. Jiang Pengji borrowed the momentum and left the horses back. He took out the long rope from behind his waist and through the side with the iron hook. It coiled around the wall like a snake. When the Red Lotus group saw the tens of thousands of soldiers below the city walls, they were so scared that their legs turned to jelly. There were only a few hundred members of the Red Lotus group at the sentry post, not even 1,000 of them. Jiang Pengji had always liked a fast-paced attack. She would never give the enemy a chance to catch their breath. After the long rope was wrapped around the wall, her feet firmly stepped on the wall. While pulling the long rope, she tilted her body and kicked her feet to climb up. The city wall was 6 or 7 meters high. Before the Red Lotus group could react, she had already climbed up the city wall. What greeted them was the shiny silver spear in her hand. The soldiers below did not have Jiang Pengji's dashing maneuvers, but with her attracting the enemy's firepower, it was not difficult for them to climb up the city wall. The Red Lotus group naively thought that the small city could stop the advance of Jiang Pengji's army and buy them half a day's time. As it turned out, even the time it took to burn a stick of incense was too long. Faced with Jiang Pengji's menacing army, the Red Lotus group had long been scared to the point of wetting their pants. It had only been a short while, but the commander of the vanguard battalion had already climbed up the city wall and started a massacre on the city wall. She directly crushed their momentum and shattered it like glass shards. Following that, more soldiers climbed up the city wall, each one like wolves and tigers. Before the Red Lotus group could organize an effective defense, everything was over. Before the main army arrived, the small city had already been captured. Their efficiency could be said to be the best in the industry. Yang Xi's expression was complicated. Looking at the open city gate, he finally understood why Jiang Pengji wanted him to lead the vanguard battalion. The soldiers were fierce, and the generals were fierce. Only a fierce commander could lead an even more ferocious elite army. Jiang Pengji spoke very little when fighting. She disdained arguing with others. To quote the words of the viewers in the live stream room, "Society is my sister Pengji. She doesn't talk much. She doesn't talk. She directly confronts her. Jiang Pengji asked Dian Yen to lead the vanguard battalion to clean up the battlefield and count the soldiers who had been injured or killed by stray arrows. When the main army arrived, the city gate had already been opened. The arrows under the city wall had also been cleaned up by the soldiers. Except for the bloodstains that had not been cleaned up in time, it was almost impossible to see that a small-scale siege had broken out here. Even though Qiguan Rang was prepared, he was still shocked. Let's rest for a day. At dawn tomorrow, we will prepare to enter the mountain road. Jiang Pengji narrowed her eyes slightly. She was still dressed in a red and white military uniform. There was not the slightest hint of warmth from before. Instead, there was a chilling murderous aura. Looking at the time, I think it's about time. Qiguan Rang said, the mountain road is long. Should we pack lightly? Yes. After frowning, Yang Si suggested, it's better to bring 2 or 3 days' worth of dry rations. Although the Red Lotus group is just a motley crew, they are not completely brainless. If they attack our grain transport team, although it won't be fatal, it will still cause some trouble. Jiang Pengji sneered. Yang Si had really overestimated the intelligence of the Red Lotus group. Yes, let's do as Jing Rong says. Elsewhere, under the suggestion of his trusted scholar, the leader of the Red Lotus group transferred most of the guards in Jinmen County. Now, there were only a few thousand troops in the county, and they were all old, weak, and disabled soldiers. Coupled with the freezing weather, the combat power they could exert was almost zero. And Shui had already made preparations to respond. While contacting his informants, he also instructed the brothers guarding the city of Jinmen County to be alert. After making these preparations, An Shui planned to stir up another wave of trouble. He passed on the scholar's deployment to Jiang Pengji through his informants. When everyone saw it, they were speechless. Yang Si said disdainfully, their brains aren't that great, but their hearts are vicious. However, this 007 spy, An Shui, was very good. His acting skills were off the charts. Let's act according to plan. First, send scouts into the mountain road. Once they discover that the troops in Jinmen County have withdrawn, report back immediately. In this era, communication was not convenient. If they could make good use of the time difference, they could completely toy with the enemy. She planned to take down Jinmen County as quickly as possible and attack another city before the Red Lotus group could react. Yes, Jiang Pengji's appetite was not just a county. She planned to take down the entire Chengde County in one go. Chapter 631. Chengde County had a total of 4 counties, Jinmen County, Fenghu County, Honglian County, and Qiuyu County. If the plan went smoothly, taking down Jinmen County would be as easy as pie. But Jinmen County could not satisfy Jiang Pengji's appetite. Her ambition was far greater than that. The Red Lotus group thinks that we're beating them at their own game. We might as well imitate them. Qiguan Rang sneered. He loved tricking people. According to my lord's prediction, how long will it take to take down Jinmen County? Jiang Pengji narrowed her eyes and calculated. After a while, she said, although our march is in a hurry and we can't carry siege weapons, it will take at most 2 hours to take down Jinmen County, which is unguarded. If we include the time spent on the mountain road, it will take almost a day. What do you think, Wenjing? Qiguan Rang held the feather fan that had never left his side and gently waved it. Yang Si, who was beside him, saw it and subconsciously shuddered. He silently shifted his position. He had seen eccentrics and pretentious people, but he had never seen someone waving a fan in the middle of winter. Qiguan Rang said, according to the information from our informants, the Red Lotus group wants to exterminate us and has formulated a series of measures for this. They've worked so hard. If we don't give them a chance to perform, wouldn't it be too heartless? If the Red Lotus group wanted to trick them, then they could naturally do the same. Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows and motioned for Qiguan Rang to continue. He said, "The Red Lotus Group thinks that we will attack Fenghu County with a large number of troops. If we don't show up for a long time, I'm afraid it will make them suspicious. Why don't we send some scouts to confuse them and make them think that our intention is Fenghu County, not Jinmen County? We'll delay as much as possible until my lord takes down Jinmen County, then we'll turn around and attack Fenghu County. After all, the mountain road to Fenghu County is very short." Yang Si was a little unhappy when he heard this. "If that's the case, won't we become a tired army? It's on the mountain road again. According to the Red Lotus Group's plan, we'll be besieged on the mountain road and it'll be difficult to break through." Jian Yen couldn't help but ask. Realizing that everyone's eyes were on him, he silently shut his mouth. Jiang Pengji tried to smooth things over. She said, "Deputy Diane's words make sense, but if the plan was that simple, it wouldn't be Wenzheng." Sure enough, Qiguan Rang continued, "Indeed, in this way, we will become a weary army. If we are besieged on the mountain path, I'm afraid we won't be able to escape. However, what if we besiege the Red Lotus Group on the mountain path? The situation will be completely different." Jian Yen felt like he was listening to a heavenly book. It was clear that they were the ones being besieged. How had it become the Red Lotus Group being besieged? Jiang Pengji smiled and said, "According to the Red Lotus Group's calculations, aren't they planning to capture the small town, enter the mountain road, and surround us from both sides? Since that's the case, why don't we throw out the bait, lure them into the mountain path, and then trap them to death?" Jian Yan's brain wasn't quick to react. After thinking for a long time, he suddenly realized that he was pretending to be a pig to eat the tiger. First, they would have the main force attack Jinmen County. At the same time, they would have scouts investigate the vicinity of Fenghu County. This would create the illusion that they intended to attack Fenghu County. Not only would it confuse the Red Lotus Group's judgment, but it would also delay them. Once Jinmen County had been captured, they would turn around and return to set up an ambush. Then, they would send another team into the mountain road to create the illusion for the Red Lotus Group that the main force had already entered the mountain road in the direction of Fenghu County. In reality, they were still hiding on the mountain road to Jinmen County. When the Red Lotus Group saw this, they would definitely think that their prey had taken the bait. When they planned to enter the mountain road and cooperate with the troops of Fenghu County to outflank Jiang Pengji, the main force of the ambush would appear again. The main force cooperated with the soldiers who had entered the mountain path earlier and worked together to take down this wave of sneak attacks from the enemy. Jian Yen had already shut his mouth obediently. As expected, these scholars were each more heartless than the other. While the others were still at the stage of being unable to resist, they were already thinking about how to counterattack the enemy. Qiguan Rang continued, "This plan isn't difficult, but it's a little harsh. Time is too tight." Jiang Pengji smiled and said, "What's wrong with that? Wenzheng, just wait and see how I take down Jinmen County." Yang Si was about to say something sarcastic, but the image of Jiang Pengji taking the lead appeared in his mind at the right time. He also chose to remain silent. Qiguan Rang added, "Jinmen County can be occupied with a surprise strategy, but the effect won't be as great if the same move is used a second time. As for the other 3 counties, in the end, we still have to fight with real swords and guns, determine the winner and the loser." Jiang Pengji didn't quite agree with Qiguan Rang's statement. Yang Si's surprise strategy could only be used once, but there was still room for him to make use of it. Once an opportunity was seized, it had to be fully utilized. Jiang Pengji pursed her lips and said, "Because the mountain road is fragile, we can't bring any siege equipment when we attack Jinmen County. However, once we take down Jinmen County, the situation will be different." Before I set off, I privately instructed Xiaoyu to prepare the siege equipment. I asked him to seize the opportunity and transport the equipment to Jinmen County on time. Based on the time spent on the road, Xiaoyu's siege equipment will arrive after we have rested for a day while we counter-encircle the Red Lotus group. While the Red Lotus group is flying around like a headless fly, we'll attack Chuyu County in one go. On the battlefield, one couldn't slack off at all. The opportunity was fleeting, and there was no time to lose. Jiang Pengji understood this principle, so she thought about it more thoroughly than anyone else. If they waited until Jinmen County was conquered before informing Su Ku to transport the siege equipment, they would have missed the best opportunity to fight back and forth for a few days. Her combat style was very distinct, fast-paced, and meticulous in her calculations. Others would proceed step by step in an orderly manner. Jiang Pengji, on the other hand, carried out multiple tasks at the same time. She pushed forward from all sides, one step after another, and used this to create a fast-paced sense of tension. In ancient times, communication was inconvenient. Jiang Pengji's combat style was even more urgent, and it could often cause mental oppression to the enemy. This kind of oppression could not only disrupt the enemy's heart, but it could also shake their morale. Everyone was surprised. After we're done with Jinmen County, we'll attack Chuyu County directly? Jiang Pengji said, the troops of 2 counties are concentrated in Fenghu County. Honglian County is the headquarters of the Red Lotus Group, and its defense is not weak. Besides Chuyu County, do we have any other choice? More importantly, the official road from Jinmen County to Chuyu County is flat and wide, and the distance is short, which is conducive to the transportation of siege equipment. With Chuyu County as the target, we can save a lot of time. For a motley crew like the Red Lotus Group, a major defeat could turn them into headless flies flying around aimlessly. Jiang Pengji had to seize the time. Before the Red Lotus Group regained its composure, she had to deliver a series of crazy blows to them. As long as Jinmen County and Chuyu County were stabilized, the Red Lotus Group would not be able to jump around again. Little did she know that Shui, her teammate who had assisted her in the battle, could bring her another surprise. Night fell and shrouded the earth. A pure white moon hung in the sky. Jiang Pengji was leaning against it and taking a nap when a commotion suddenly came from her mind. Chapter 632. The noisy mechanical voice disturbed her sleep. Jiang Pengji, bastard Jiang Pengji, don't play dead, I know you're awake. If you have the guts to lock me up, answer me if you have the guts. Answer me. If you continue to pretend to be deaf and dumb, I'll annoy you for the whole night. I'll stop when you're willing to talk to me. The system muttered, and it even started a rhythm. It was difficult for Jiang Pengji to ignore it. She wanted to kill the system. What are you up to this time? Jiang Pengji asked in her heart coldly. She got up carefully and did not disturb anyone. She climbed up the city wall. The soldiers were still patrolling and keeping watch. Seeing Jiang Pengji's red and white military uniform, they all perked up and saluted. She waved her hand and said in a low voice, I just couldn't sleep at night, so I came out for a walk. You guys continue with your work, don't worry about me. The group of patrolling soldiers nodded slightly and moved sideways to avoid Jiang Pengji. She found a secluded corner. The cold night wind blew on her face, dispelling some of her sleepiness. System, you better give me a reasonable reason. Why are you suddenly disturbing me in the middle of the night? Do you want to die? The system retorted, then why don't you kill one for me to see? Oh, you're fearless. Jiang Pengji narrowed her eyes dangerously. The reason why she chose to imprison the system instead of completely destroying it was because she was afraid that the system would find out and alert the enemy. Now it had become the system's capital to play tricks. She could not help but laugh. She did not know what the system was like, but this system, TSK, its IQ was really low. Times had changed. Did it think she would always be afraid? Jiang Pengji exhaled a white breath and asked in her heart, I still want to sleep, I don't want to talk nonsense with you. If you have something to say, say it quickly. If you continue to be pretentious, you can do whatever you want. Do you think I'll ignore you? That's the world of my brain, you better be clear about it. The system had been imprisoned by Jiang Pengji for almost 2 years. It had developed a subconscious fear of Jiang Pengji. It could not be afraid. Jiang Pengji was a shrewd person. She only provided the system with the points of popularity every day. To the system, popularity points were the energy it needed to survive and grow, similar to the food humans needed. Regardless of whether it was a human or a system, to be imprisoned in a silent world, to be given only the minimum amount of food every day, to ensure that they would not starve to death, and to be imprisoned for 1 to 2 years at a time. If a human were to go crazy, even the system would not be able to handle it. There was a reason for it to cause a ruckus this time. The system stuttered. Can I discuss something with you? The originally arrogant system was now timid and timid. Jiang Pengji did not know whether to laugh or cry. System, can you be any more cowardly? Reasonable things can be discussed. If you want me to let you go and give you freedom, you should just give up. The system hurriedly said, No, it's not about that, I mean. Can you restrain yourself a little for now? If it's possible, it's best to lock me up more tightly. It's been a bit special recently, I'm afraid that there might be dimensional merchants patrolling around. Planar merchants patrolling everywhere? Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows and her expression became solemn. What do you mean? The system said, I don't mean anything. Can you not be so guarded against me? I'm serious this time. Regardless of whether it's you or me, we absolutely cannot be caught by dimensional merchants with patrol orders, or else we're done for. We're now grasshoppers on the same rope. If I'm done for, you won't get any benefits either. If it weren't for Lu Shi's body, you would have long been expelled and exiled by the rules here. Jiang Pengji snorted softly. I don't care. None of the federal soldiers were afraid of death. The system was silent for a long time. You're really annoying. What do I have to do for you to agree? The system's coquettish grumble made Jiang Pengji frown deeply. Dimensional merchants with patrol orders? What's that? From what you're saying, you seem to be very afraid. The system said impatiently, Nonsense, have you ever seen a smuggler who isn't afraid of the police? Jiang Pengji was speechless. The system said, I'm the Dimensional Palace Intrigue streaming system. Opening the streaming channel will temporarily open up a channel between 2 unrelated planes, causing the balance of several planes to be destroyed. That's why there are so-called reborns, or time travelers. Regardless of whether they're time travelers or reborns, they're all illegal immigrants without a license. As for the dimensional merchants with patrol orders, they're existences with licenses that allow them to travel between different planes. Jiang Pengji's interest was piqued, and some malice grew in her heart. If you're caught by them, what will happen to you? The system sneered, seeing through Jiang Pengji's plan. Jiang Pengji, I advise you not to have the idea of perishing together with them. Do you know how much energy is needed to open up the barrier between 2 planes? I'm of the same level as that dimensional merchant. If he catches me, he'll lock me up for a few years at most. He can't do anything to me. But you're different. You don't belong to this world. You're an anomaly that affects the original development of this plane. To put it bluntly, you're a pathogen. When the time comes, you'll die a horrible death. You can still live for many years. Isn't it good to be alive? Why must you go against me? Jiang Pengji wasn't the slightest bit afraid of the system that was outwardly fierce but inwardly weak. She laughed contemptuously, and the disdain in her words was undisguised. Is that so? So you're so powerful. Then why are you imprisoned in my spiritual realm? If the system had an expression, its face would definitely be as black as the bottom of a pot. If it hadn't been careless and Jiang Pengji had deliberately pretended to be a pig to eat a tiger, would it have been caught carelessly? The system had lived for a long time, but it was the first time it had fallen into the hands of its host. Therefore, it hated the kind of host that was smart but disobedient the most. Was it not good to be a little naive, a little stupid, and a little smart? Although the host would have to pay some small remuneration, at least the host would be a winner in life while he was alive. Being reborn, wearing the halo of a protagonist, the intelligence of the supporting characters would decrease collectively, and the host would cheat all the way to the peak of life. Wasn't it exciting to think about it? Unfortunately, he met Jiang Pengji, a freak. The system felt wronged and wanted to cry. Jiang Pengji said, "You're full of lies and have too many criminal records. I believe at most 30% of what you say, and I'm skeptical of the other 70%. Your ridicule just now gave me inspiration. You said, which smuggler isn't afraid of the police? In that case, the dimensional merchant is the police, and you're the smuggler? You also said that you're of the same level as the dimensional merchant, but now you're trapped by me. TSK, there's a lot of information. I seem to know something." The system was faintly flustered. "What do you mean by a lot of information?" Jiang Pengji asked it in return with a natural expression, "Why should I tell you?" "System," Jiang Pengji asked the system, "what does the dimensional merchant look like? Does he have the same heart as you?" The system was almost choked to the point of being speechless. What did she mean by having the same heart as me? Chapter 633. The system was exasperated. The patrolling merchants are just sanctimonious people. Regardless of whether they are reborn or time travelers, once they are discovered, they will be humanely destroyed. In terms of ruthlessness, they are even more ruthless than me. I will at least let the host die of old age, but he won't. The system tried hard to dispel Jiang Pengji's idea of stirring up trouble. If the system didn't need Jiang Pengji to hide its whereabouts and avoid the patrolling merchants, it wouldn't have revealed so much. It thought that Jiang Pengji would be frightened, but she nodded in agreement. There's nothing wrong with enforcing the law impartially. The system almost couldn't breathe. Who are you on the same boat with now? Don't forget, you are also a stowaway. If you are caught, the situation will be very serious. You will be killed and your soul will be destroyed. Fine, fine, fine. I promise you, whether it is me or the main body, we will not do anything to hurt you in the future. Big sister, now is not the time to be willful and mischievous. Jiang Pengji smiled. You and I have formed a temporary alliance, but it will fall apart in the end. This kind of promise is as worthless as toilet paper. If you are sincere, answer my question honestly. Is the main body of the system really in Wang Huiyun's body? Or is the system in her body just a subsystem? Is it just a bait separated from the main body to mess up the world? Answer me, don't hide it. The system was stunned. It said, "That's 2 questions." Jiang Pengji snorted. Then answer the first question. Is the system in Wang Huiyun the main body? The system answered very decisively, no. Hearing that, Jiang Pengji's lips curled into a cold and mocking smile. Sure enough, it was not the main body. In this way, she was even more certain of her previous speculation. The main body of the system was really well hidden. It was a pity that she forgot to hide the fox's tail. She was a qualified hunter, but the system was a failed prey. She said meaningfully, I thought my tricks were deep enough. I didn't expect to meet an ancestor who was born to play tricks. However, things like intelligence are destined. No matter how deep the tricks are, people are too stupid. I don't want to know what's wrong with the main body of the system. It cut itself open and divided itself into subsystems, but, please don't let it happen to me again. The system secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Since she said that, it should mean that she agreed to cooperate, right? I've answered your question. Are you willing to help me now? Jiang Pengji blinked and said innocently, don't you know that all is fair in war? Making a promise to a gangster leader? The patterns were all broken. An unstamped promise is like a roll of toilet paper to me. I can throw it away after using it. The system, F***ck, Jiang Pengji, you're shameless. Jiang Pengji crossed her arms in front of her chest. When will that dimensional patrol merchant arrive? I can report you to him. The system snorted twice. In your dreams. It will take at least 10 years. Don't even think about tricking me. 10 years? That long? Jiang Pengji asked, it's been more than 10 years. Why are you so eager to seek my protection now? Trying to trick me again? The system said in a contemptuous voice, you are a human. How long do you have to live? I'm a system. Time is cheap to me. To you, it takes up 1/5 of your life. To me, it's only 3 to 5 days, or even a few hours. Mortal, don't use your time to measure my time. As an almost eternal existence, you are but a mayfly to me that is born and dead. Tremble, lowly human. Jiang Pengji responded with an, oh. She was not provoked by the system's words. She stabbed back bitterly. Congratulations. Then you can go to prison in 3 to 5 days. I can still be free and unfettered for more than 10 years before I'm destroyed by the dimensional merchant. The system, F***ck, where did the director find such a hateful female protagonist? Jiang Pengji sneered. She buried what happened that night in the bottom of her heart. It did not stir up the slightest ripple. With the system, it seemed that it was not unacceptable for there to be any dimensional patrol merchants. Just as the system said, reborn or time travelers were all outsiders who illegally occupied the bodies of the indigenous people. To the local plane, they were all pathogens. If there were really rules in the world, in order to maintain balance and order, it was natural to eliminate the anomalies. She had nothing to say. What would come would eventually come. Jiang Pengji accepted it calmly. Of course, she would not let her remaining time go to waste just because she was going to die in more than 10 years. On the contrary, she would live a more exciting life. She would live a more passionate and unrestrained life. Even if she had to die, she would let the people of this plane and their descendants remember the name Jiang Pengji thoroughly. Her eyes seemed to be burning with flames. Not only did the system's words not make her restrain herself, but it also stimulated Jiang Pengji's determination to do something big. She felt that unifying the 9 prefectures was not a big deal. It was better to unite the world together. Was it because she had turned this plane upside down and deviated from the trajectory of fate? Would that annoying merchant arrive in advance? If it knew that Jiang Pengji was such a troublemaker who was not afraid of death, the system would have endured it no matter what. Now it was full of regret. As a small subsystem, it could not defeat Jiang Pengji. After being exposed to the night wind for most of the day, Jiang Pengji raised her hand to pat the cold air off her body. She was ready to get up and go back to sleep. On the way, she happened to meet Yang Si, who had woken up at night. Jiang Pengji saw that his eyes were misty and that he was floating as he walked. He yawned all the way. My lord, why did you come out dressed in military attire? Yang Si covered his mouth with his hand so that it would not be too rude to open his mouth while yawning. Jiang Pengji said casually, I had a nightmare and woke up in fright. I was not sleepy at all, so I went out for a walk. Yang Si did not suspect anything and continued to sleep. Tomorrow, he would enter the mountain road and attack Jinmen County. After that, there would be a series of high-intensity combat plans. With his weak body, after riding a horse for a few days, he was so tired that he felt like he was falling apart. If he did not seize the time to recover his strength, he was afraid that he would not even be able to climb the mountain road. That would be embarrassing. Jiang Pengji also returned to her original position, crossed her arms, and slept. Regardless of whether it was the system or the dimensional merchant, the most important thing now was to take down Jinmen County. She did not care about anything else. However, she really did not expect the system itself to have a brain. Was it dark under the light? It was indeed a trick. She yawned and found a comfortable position. Soon, she fell asleep, and her breathing became long and steady. The next day, the weather was rare. The sky was blue and looked refreshing. The golden sunlight shone on the snow. It was golden and dazzling, so bright that it was a little uncomfortable. Jiang Pengji gathered her troops and horses. She was still dressed in her red and white military attire. She looked energetic and had a high aura. "My lord, the situation of the mountain road has been investigated. Last night, I also ordered people to quietly sweep away the snow. Now we can pass through." Chapter 634. The mountain path was winding and rugged, and the narrow road stretched as far as the eye could see. Jiang Pengji rode on Little White's back with relative ease. As an excellent descendant of Xiaofan and the warhorses of the northern borderline, Little White's endurance and weight-bearing ability were extremely strong. Every step was steady and easy. In contrast, the others looked a little embarrassed. The mountain path to Jinmen County is already so rugged. I wonder how difficult the road to Fenghu County will be, Yang Si was also secretly complaining. As a counselor, he enjoyed special treatment. Most of the other soldiers walked. He could still ride a horse and did not need to walk on his legs, but the bumpy ride still made him suffer. Jiang Pengji saw that his face was deathly pale with exhaustion that could not be dispelled. She then looked at the purplish-red horse under him, which was panting. She took the initiative to suggest, "Why don't you ride Little White? Look at you. I think you'll be exhausted before we reach Jinmen County." Yang Si was a little tempted, but when he thought that intelligent horses had a temper, he suddenly became a little timid. "Won't it throw me off the horse?" Yang Si nervously grabbed the reins. If he was not afraid that Little White would be uncomfortable, he would have hugged the horse's neck for safety. Unexpectedly, not only did Little White not throw Yang Si off the horse's back, but it continued to hurry on without complaint. Don't deliberately cause trouble. Little White's temperament is still good. Jiang Pengji changed to Yang Si's previous horse and controlled the horse with the reins. Fortunately, our opponent this time is the Red Lotus group. If it were a smarter enemy, I wouldn't dare to take this mountain path. She looked around at the terrain on the horse's back and teased him with a smile. Taking the mountain path was indeed a strange move. They could avoid the enemy's eyes and ears without being noticed. Whether it was a sneak attack or something else, it had a miraculous effect. However, risks and benefits coexisted. The mountain path was not only suitable for them to sneak attack the enemy, but it was also suitable for the enemy to ambush them. Little White walked very steadily, which was a world of difference from the previous bumpy ride. This made Yang Si feel a little better. He said, "The situation is different. My lord marches at lightning speed. Even if the enemy has the intention to ambush us, they won't be able to make it in time." According to Yang Si's estimation, when they had just captured the small town, the higher-ups of the Red Lotus group had just received news of their arrival. It would take time to transmit the order. By the time they reacted and prepared for an ambush, we would have already passed through the mountain road and taken down Jinmen County. Jiang Pengji fought at a fast pace, but how many people could do that? Most people could only pay attention to one place. By the time they received the news, the best opportunity had already passed. Why were excellent strategists so sought after? It wasn't just because they were able to win a battle from 1,000 miles away in a world where information transmission was lagging behind. More importantly, they were more comprehensive and thoughtful than ordinary people. It was like playing chess. Ordinary people would take one step at a time, but schemers like them would take 10 steps at a time. Just as Yang Si had said, although the mountain road leading to Jinmen County was long, the slope was relatively gentle, and it consumed less energy than expected. Which of Jiang Pengji's soldiers did not train with weights as a daily routine? For an ordinary army, it would take 6 to 8 hours to pass through this mountain path, but for them, it would only take a little more than 2 hours. At the same time, the troops of Jinmen County had also been urgently transferred to Fenghu County to defend. The Red Lotus Group arranged several scout teams, and sure enough, they found suspicious people. They judged that these were enemy scouts who had attacked the outposts. The scholar clenched his fists nervously. The room was burning with a blazing charcoal fire, and it was so hot that his palms were sweating. Sure enough, Lu Shi's target is Fenghu County. The scholar nervously put his hands behind his back and paced back and forth in the hall, as if he wanted to rub a hole in the ground. He said, "Go and investigate again. Report back quickly if there's anything. If you find Lu Shi's main force, don't act rashly and alert him." "Yes." Not long after, a voice came from outside the hall again. The Red Lotus Group had found traces of scout activity at the exit of the mountain road in Fenghu County. Every once in a while, someone would come to report back, which made the scholar extremely nervous. Lu Shi had sent a large number of scouts. What did this mean? It meant that the number of troops he had brought was large, and it was very likely that it was more than 10,000. Report, report. Report. The messenger kept going back and forth. Every time he received a reply, the scholar's nervousness increased. In the end, he was so anxious that he was sweating profusely. He went out and looked at the sky outside. Flustered and exasperated, he said, "Haven't the reinforcements from Jinmen County arrived yet?" The messenger hung his head and answered timidly, "They're still half a day away." Half a day? So slow? The scholar was angry and anxious. He had never felt that time would pass so slowly. He was like an ant on a hot pan. For him, every minute and every second was torture. Now, he only hoped that Lu Shi would move slowly. It would be best if he could wait for their reinforcements to enter the city before coming. Otherwise, he really did not have the confidence to fight against Jiang Pengji with his current troops. Where is Mr. N? Quickly invite Mr. N over to discuss countermeasures. Thinking of An Shui, the scholar had a backbone. He hurriedly asked the servant beside him to invite An Shui. The manservant ran as fast as he could, but An Shui was no longer in Jinmen County. "Do you know where Mr. N went?" The scholar did not feel that anything was wrong. Although An Shui had left, his brothers who were close to him were still there. The scholar did not suspect anything. The servant replied, "I've asked carefully. Mr. N seems to have gone to Honglian County overnight." The scholar frowned. He did not understand why An Shui had gone to Honglian County at this time. However, he did not dwell on this issue for too long, because another messenger had found traces of scouts. What made the scholar even more terrified was that the scouts were getting closer and closer to Jinmen County. In other words, when these scouts had finished investigating the situation, Lu Shi's main force would attack. Thinking of the reinforcements that would arrive in half a day, the scholar wanted to grab his hair in frustration. Because the scouts were moving around frequently and spying on their situation, the scholar had never thought that this was just bait set up by Jiang Pengji. Qiguan Rang was in charge of the Central Army. Under his arrangements, scouts were sent out to scare and tease the Red Lotus Group. As for the main force? At this moment, they had already passed through the mountain road and crossed a vast expanse of white snow, galloping toward Jinmen County. Chengde County belonged to the northern region. The snow was heavy in winter. Except for the official road, no one cleared the snow in other places. Usually, they waited for the weather to warm up and let it melt on its own. Jiang Pengji had already asked the people of the vanguard battalion to prepare plain-colored linen and draped it over their bodies as cover. The weather was good that day. The snow reflected the light. In order not to hurt their eyes, the guards at the city gate would not stare at the snow outside the city for a long time. The garrison of Jinmen County was almost completely transferred away. Only 3,000 old, weak, and disabled soldiers were left behind. The sun was shining brightly, and the reflection made their eyes very uncomfortable. Outside, it was freezing cold. There were only a few Red Lotus group on the city wall who were seriously guarding. Chapter 635. Gaokao Yila, streamer, do you want to cover your eyes with a coarse cloth to block the light? It's so annoying. In ancient times, there were no sunglasses or protective glasses. The ultraviolet rays reflected from the snow will harm the eyes. It's easy to get snow blindness. Little angels, if the person above didn't remind me, I would have forgotten about this. You must be careful of snow blindness. Let's get together, please, we're at war now. Whether we can survive is still a problem. What's a pair of eyes worth? Jiang Pengji turned off the bullet screen in the streaming room and turned the screen to the smallest size to avoid distraction. Dian Yen was beside her. Because he was nervous, his voice sounded a little rough. My lord, could it be a trap? He saw that there were only a few soldiers on the city gate. They were too lax. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, do you think everyone is like me, your lord? When I run the army, I issue orders repeatedly. Those who disobey will be dealt with according to military law. Those who slack and play tricks have to think twice. The Red Lotus group is different. Discipline is lax. Now that most of the elites have been transferred away, the remaining people think that they have nothing to worry about. Naturally, they won't take extra precautions. It's such a cold day. Who wants to be cold? They'll slack if they can. If the guards on the city gate assumed a solemn stance, Jiang Pengji would be worried that there would be an ambush. Dian Yen nodded thoughtfully. Looking at the city gate, Jiang Pengji narrowed her eyes dangerously. She said, I really don't like this city gate. Dian Yen didn't understand. Weren't all the city gates the same? Why was there one that didn't like it? Jiang Pengji said, Dian Yen, lead the soldiers to cover me. Now we have to break into the city as fast as possible. I have a good idea. Dian Yen didn't ask what Jiang Pengji's idea was. He only needed to do what he was supposed to do. My lord, please rest assured. Jiang Pengji nodded. She looked down at the long spear in her hand. It was too thin and too long. She turned her head to look at Dian Yan's waist. She reached out and said, lend me your 2 big axes. Dian Yan was tall and strong. He had great strength. He especially liked to use such heavy weapons during battles. With one swing of the axe, he could split a person from the top of his skull to his pelvis. The scene was bloody and violent. Every time he came back from a battle, he looked like he had been fished out from a pool of blood. Hearing that Jiang Pengji wanted to borrow his weapon, it wasn't that Dian Yen was unwilling, but, my lord, these 2 axes are too heavy, I'm afraid. Dian Yen had not finished his words when his eyes widened so much that they were about to pop out. The 2 axes were specially made and weighed nearly 50 kilograms, but they were as light as goose feathers in Jiang Pengji's hands. She did not seem to be straining at all. Every time Dian Yen thought he had a good understanding of his lord's combat abilities, she would always be able to break his record. The weight is quite comfortable, she pondered for a moment, then her lips curled into a faint smile. She looked at the city gate with malice and interest. At that moment, seeing Jiang Pengji holding 2 axes in her hands, the audience in the streaming room was stirred up again, and the bullet screen was filled with comments. Cola, yesterday I saw a young general in red and silver armor, and today it's a lowly with 2 axes? Lo Ciji Lianmeng, the host's body is already 17 or 18 years old. Lolita? Have you ever seen such an old Lolita? In Yuejia Zhuge Qinma, there's nothing wrong with an old lowly. Gui Kai Guofengxiu, I've already moved the bench and melon seeds and drinks. I'm sitting down to watch the host's heroic battle. Boss Chow, TSK, the commenter above, you really have a heavy taste. People will really die when the host goes to war. Faced with bloody corpses, large and small intestines flowing out of the abdominal cavity, spleens, accumulated feces, and crushed brains, are you sure you can eat melon seeds and drinks? Thinking of Boss Chow's bullet screen, a similar scene involuntarily appeared in his mind, and he almost vomited. Jiang Pengji really wanted to cause trouble. At present it was not clear about the specific garrison situation in Jinmen district, so Jiang Pengji did not dare to be careless. In order to end the battle quickly, she could only choose to explode and shatter the Red Lotus Group's momentum with a thunderous attack. She would use the fastest speed to take down Jinmen district. In this way, she had to cause trouble. Yang Si, who was protected at the back, looked in the direction of the city gate from afar. He did not know whether Jiang Pengji would directly set up a battle formation to attack or launch a sneak attack. He pondered in his heart. There was already movement from the soldiers in front. No. What does my lord want to do? Yang Si almost screamed because he saw Jiang Pengji turn over and get on Little White's back. A row of soldiers advanced in an orderly manner. Because of the snow, the sunlight, and the white cloth draped over Jiang Pengji's body, the soldiers on the city gate did not immediately discover her traces. The soldiers of the Red Lotus Group hid under the pilasters to take shelter from the wind. Their clothes were not uniform. Some of them wore very thick clothes, while others were very thin. They curled up and shivered with their backs straight. The only thing they had in common was that they were all older, and their physical strength was not as good as that of the younger generation. Oh my God, it's so cold, he opened his mouth and exhaled a breath of white air. The hot air that he had painstakingly held back escaped again. Stop talking. The more you talk, the colder it gets. If you have the energy to talk, why don't you shake a little more? If you can't do it, pray to the gods. I think it's a little useful. In this era, ordinary people relied on walking to get around. Did they rely on shaking to keep warm? As for hot water pots? They did not exist. They were just a group of old, weak, and disabled soldiers. It was good enough that they could survive in this world. How could they dare to ask for more? The veterans guarding the city gate huddled together to keep warm. They barely had some warmth. In a world of ice and snow, they did not have enough clothes to keep out the cold. When guarding the city during the day, they just sent 1 or 2 people to stand guard. The others huddled under the pilasters to take shelter from the wind. They huddled together to keep warm. When the people on guard could not stand it anymore, they would take turns to do it. At this time, someone complained, "I wasn't on duty today. I really don't know what's gotten into the higher-ups. They transferred everyone away and made me the scapegoat. You're not the only one who's unlucky. Stop talking. It's the chief's order to transfer people away. They've gone to eradicate the heretics." Heretics? Who's the heretic? Who else can it be? Lu Shi from next door. If the gods say he's a heretic, then he's a heretic, a demon who brings disaster to the world. Lu Shi? Almost everyone in the north knew this name. It was the same for the people of Chengde County. Most of them made a living by mining coal, but in the current world, the people could not even afford food. Who would buy coal? No one bought coal, which meant that many people who dug coal for a living would lose their livelihood. They could not even feed their families. In the past 2 years, Jiang Pengji had repeatedly purchased large amounts of coal from Chengde County. When the Red Lotus Group and Jiang Pengji had not completely fallen out, she had taken care of the business in Chengde County and provided for many people. As for the topic of heretics and demons, most people agreed with the crusade. Only a small group of people remained silent. At this time, someone looked up at the sky and found many dark spots in the sky. He raised his hand and pointed. "What's that?" Chapter 636. Enemy attack, enemy. A wave of arrows fell from the sky and landed behind the battlements. The voices of the gate guards stopped abruptly, and they let out a soft whimper. Their half-standing bodies collapsed with a loud crash, but the rain of arrows was still falling. Soon, the fallen corpses were pierced into hedgehogs. Dark red blood flowed out of their bodies and seeped into the stone bricks of the city wall, dampening the ground. A nauseating sweet and fishy smell filled the air. After the first wave of arrows, everyone, regardless of whether they were standing or sitting on the ground, was on high alert. How was this possible? Why were there enemies? Someone was shot in the arm by an arrow. He clung tightly to the base of the battlements, holding a wooden shield in his hand, and quietly poked his head out. It would have been better if they hadn't seen it, but once they saw it, they were almost scared out of their wits. Beads of cold sweat broke out on their backs. The snow under the city wall was thick. At first glance, it seemed nothing, but when they looked closely, they could see something wriggling quickly on the snow, like a swarm of ants surging toward the city wall. When they got closer and looked again, it was clear that there were countless enemies. Who were they? Where did they come from? The rain of arrows continued to fall from the sky. The Red Lotus Group was scared out of their wits. They didn't even realize that the enemies under the city wall didn't carry any siege equipment. As long as they defended against the rain of arrows and organized a wave of counterattacks, they might be able to survive a little longer. However, they were already stunned by this sudden wave of attacks. Not to mention organizing a counterattack, it was already good enough that no one stepped on them. Some soldiers hurriedly picked up the weapons that had been placed aside and tried to shoot arrows down the city wall. More people covered their heads and scurried away. Jian Yen watched Jiang Pengji ride away and secretly gritted his teeth. He ordered the soldiers to continue advancing down the city wall while continuing to shoot arrows. Cover the Lord. Yang Si, who was at the back, saw Jiang Pengji's figure that had shrunk to a small dot. He was so scared that he almost fell into the snow. Even if she was the commander of the vanguard battalion, who would act so willfully and recklessly like her? Yang Si's heart was in his throat. He almost forgot how to breathe. He stared ahead without blinking. Even though his eyes were a little sore from staring, he still didn't dare to blink. He was afraid that Jiang Pengji would die on the battlefield in the blink of an eye. The current situation was much more thrilling than yesterday's skirmish. Just the height of the two city walls was not on the same level. Yesterday, the small city was only slightly more than 20 feet high. His lord could climb the city wall with her coquettish movements. What about today? How was the lord going to get up the city wall that was 30 feet high? Jiang Pengji had only climbed halfway. Perhaps she would be shot into a hedgehog by the Red Lotus Group on the city wall. At this moment, he finally understood Wei Si's sadness. With such a carefree and worrisome lord, the officials were either worried sick or scared out of their wits. Yang Si felt that his lifespan would be halved if he were to go through 2 more rounds like this. It would be difficult for him to die of old age. The viewers in the live stream also felt the same thrill as him. Yang Si was holding the line at the rear. His eyesight was limited, and he could only see Jiang Pengji's figure turning into a blurry red and white dot. However, it was different for the audience in the streaming room. Their perspective followed Jiang Pengji's movements. How could that feeling be described as pleasurable? It was even more exciting than watching a 3D movie. If their faces were closer to the screen, it felt like those arrows would fly out of the screen and pierce through their brains. Jin Tian Changsho, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, streamer, be careful. Cheongda Jibukeguo, F*ck, that arrow just now was too thrilling. If it wasn't for the streamer's quick reaction, wouldn't her body have been pierced? I still need to work hard this month, I'm trembling. Even time travel is so dangerous now. Henceforth Tian Sigeng, I'm scared to death. I estimate that pair of broad axes must weigh more than 50 kilograms, right? How strong is the streamer? She looks so relaxed. If it wasn't for the fact that it's impossible for the streaming room to be fake, would have thought that they're imitations. The viewers couldn't be blamed for their doubts. Jiang Pengji could wield the spear so fast that it left afterimages, but it was too much for her to wield a pair of long axes so fast that they left afterimages. Fortunately, Jiang Pengji had already turned off the bullet screen. Otherwise, the overwhelming and colorful bullet screen would have drowned her vision. With Jian Yen supporting her from the rear, there were very few arrows that flew down from the city wall. Relying on Little White's speed and explosive power, Jiang Pengji seemed to be in danger, but in fact, she perfectly avoided all the cold arrows with hidden killing intent. She approached the city wall without any danger. Yang Si was so anxious that he gritted his teeth. The height of the city wall of Jinmen County was different from that of the small town yesterday. How could she climb up? In his anxiety, Yang Si unconsciously clenched his fists. His nails were deeply embedded into his flesh, leaving a few nail marks on his palm. Compared to his worries, the viewers in the streaming room were mostly watching the show. Zwizen Beishijing, it's coming, the streamer's ultimate skill of jumping on the wall in the air. Don't blink. Qing Shan Weishue Bai Tu, streamer, begin your performance. However, to everyone's surprise, Jiang Pengji didn't pull out a rope or anything else at all. She was less than 20 meters away from the city gate. The muscles in her right arm suddenly swelled and accumulated strength. Her arm was bent like a bow, and the handle of the axe was thrown out by her. Her calm face had a hint of ferocity. In the next moment, a loud rumbling sound came from the city gate. The long axe was deeply embedded in the city gate. The entire body of the axe was completely submerged. Like a spider web, cracks spread in all directions with the long axe as the center, and a thin layer of ash spread out. The entire city gate trembled. She threw it with too much strength. Little White raised its hooves high. Its body was almost perpendicular to the ground. It looked up to the sky and let out a roar. Jiang Pengji had expected this. She tightened her grip on the horse's belly and grabbed the reins with the other hand. It was steady and steady. It had no intention of being thrown off. Little White took advantage of this to offset the force of its forward charge. Its raised hooves fell heavily again. In an instant, the entire streaming room was quiet. There was a momentary vacuum in the bullet screen. Jiang Pengji's chest rose and fell violently. Her fair cheeks were a little flushed. She raised another long axe high and shouted loudly. Everyone, attack! Defeat them! Dian Yen held back the surging blood in his chest and ordered, attack the city. At his command, the soldiers quickened their pace, and the rain of arrows became more concentrated. In Jinmen County, the Red Lotus Group members who stayed behind to guard the city were already panicking and at a loss when they received the news that the enemy was attacking the city. Guard the city gate, we can't let them in. A member of the Red Lotus Group roared. Only then did the panicking Red Lotus army calm down a little and mechanically defend the city gate. As long as they held the city gate and resisted the enemies outside, they might be able to wait for reinforcements. That was what many people thought. Dozens of soldiers blocked the city gate, for fear that Jiang Pengji would use the siege logs to hit the city gate. In fact, apart from weapons, Jiang Pengji did not carry any siege or defense equipment. She herself was the strongest siege murderess aura. The people of the Red Lotus group were terrified when they saw the shiny axe piercing through the top of the city gate. However, in the next instant, an even more horrifying scene occurred. Chapter 637. Dozens of members of the Red Lotus group desperately pressed against the city wall. Because of the commotion caused by the axe, the skin of the wall and sand fell from above their heads. Now that the weather was freezing, they couldn't exert their full strength at all. They pressed against the city wall with both hands, feeling as if they were touching a large block of ice. "Hold on a little longer, we can't let the thieves outside rush in." As soon as the voice of the small leader fell, dozens of people felt an unparalleled force coming from the city gate. It was as if a mountain was collapsing and pressing down on them. In the next moment, the city gate, which already had huge cracks on it, suddenly opened wide with a bang. The people behind the city gate squeezed together, almost having the illusion that their intestines had been squeezed out of their throats. One by one, they fell down. Before they could react, a snow-white figure galloped past like lightning, accompanied by the clattering of hooves. A gust of wind blew past. With a slash of the long axe, a head flew up, leaving behind a corpse whose body temperature had not yet dropped. As Jiang Pengji rushed into the city gate, the soldiers behind her were greatly encouraged. Their morale rose again, and their battle cries shook the heavens. Kill! Dian Yen didn't have the two long axes that he carried with him, so he randomly found a spear to replace them. He led the soldiers and rushed into the city wall with Jiang Pengji. Yang Si felt as if he had just taken the steepest roller coaster and was forced to bungee jump. His heart was thumping violently. When he heard the soldiers beside him ask him if they should coordinate with the attack, Yang Si trembled violently and his mind became clear. Charge! Coordinate with the Lord. Yang Si excitedly pulled out the scholar's sword that was used as a decoration at his waist. He was so excited that he almost bit his tongue. The city gate had been breached. The members of the Red Lotus group who were resisting at the city gate were all killed by Dian Yen, who rushed in after them. The reinforcements who rushed over were no match for them at all. They were completely crushed almost immediately. At one point, there was only the sound of fighting and the scene of blood splattering. Jiang Pengji rode on the back of the little white horse. Not only was she fast, but the long axe in her hand was like the soul hook axe in the hands of the King of Hell. With one swing of the axe, very few people died with a whole corpse. Even if they didn't die, Little White would follow up with a hoof and crush their sternum. Those who died on the spot were too numerous to count. Little White rarely cooperated with Jiang Pengji, but it was full of intelligence. Its performance was not any weaker than White's. It was not the slightest bit timid and shy like it usually was. It stepped on people cleanly and efficiently. If someone tried to raise their hand to stop it, it would crush their arm and sternum together. The soldiers of the Red Lotus group in Jinmen County were utterly defeated. They fled in all directions like headless flies. Some people had even just gotten out of bed, their eyes wide open. They couldn't believe that Jinmen County had changed hands so easily. "Why is it so noisy outside?" someone asked doubtfully. After the military forces in Jinmen County had been transferred away, the number of people had decreased by a lot. Now that it was winter, the people were unwilling to go out, so the streets were quiet. Now that it had suddenly become lively, the bustling noise was astonishing. However, when he listened carefully, he realized that something was wrong. How was that the sound of excitement and jubilation? It was clearly the sound of shouting to kill, beating, and howling like wolves. Is there a war outside? Can't you let people sleep? What's with all the noise? Some people with bad tempers began to roar at the source of the noise. Seeing that it was not working, they went straight back to the house with their kitchen knives in an attempt to intimidate the people. However, before they could step out of the fence, a man covered in blood rushed in from the corner of the street and fell to the ground, forming a pool of blood. Seeing this scene, the man was so scared that his legs turned to jelly. He fell to the ground, trembling, then turned around and crawled back into the house. It was so scary. They attacked all the way to the center of Jinmen County with irresistible force. Everywhere they passed, there was almost no resistance. The soldiers on Jiang Pengji's side were all well trained. They trained continuously throughout the year. Large-scale training was concentrated in midsummer and cold winter. They wore the same armor and held standard weapons. They cooperated with each other in combat, forming groups of 3 to 5 people. On the other hand, the Red Lotus group was full of people dressed in rags. Just the weather alone could defeat them, let alone the others. It was difficult for the old, weak, sick, and disabled to move. How could they pick up weapons and fight against the enemy? The other members of the Red Lotus group, who had rushed over after hearing the noise, were so scared that their legs turned to jelly. They could not summon the slightest will to fight. They laid down their weapons and surrendered, their faces ashen. Many people did not even know that Jinmen County had changed hands overnight. If the streets had not been cleaned of blood and broken limbs, who would have thought that a siege had broken out in the seemingly peaceful Jinmen County not long ago? Yang Si could not think of another word to describe this battle other than fast. The soldiers strangled the enemy and defeated the momentum of the Red Lotus group's garrison, making them unable to summon the will to fight. Then, they shouted that those who surrendered would not be killed. Jiang Pengji was a warlike person, but she was not a murderous person. Enemies who no longer had the will to fight were not worth her killing at all. She shook off the blood and minced meat on the axe and turned over to dismount. Little White, well done. I'll get someone to prepare the best food for you when we get back. Jiang Pengji stroked Little White's mane. It snorted and rubbed against her palm, acting like a spoiled child in a docile manner. Because of Jiang Pengji's violent opening of the way, Little White's snow-white fur had been dyed scarlet, which added a bit of heroic spirit. Yang Si laid out the layout and commanded. Dian Yen cleaned up the stubborn enemies and captives. Jiang Pengji also charged in the middle of the vanguard battalion. When the sun rose above their heads, it was already noon. Jiang Pengji leaned against Little White's side. She raised her hand and twisted the sleeves and hem of her clothes under her armor. Thick blood was squeezed out and dripped to the ground. It was clearly a bloody, terrifying, and horrifying scene, but she did it very naturally, as if she was wringing rainwater instead of human blood. "My lord!" A call came from afar. Jiang Pengji looked up and saw Yang Si stagger and fall off the back of the date-red horse. Jiang Pengji glanced at the scholar's sword at Yang Si's waist. It was originally only used for decoration, a good-looking ornament, but at that moment, it was permeated with the smell of blood. It was obvious that it had also seen blood. When she looked at Yang Si's face, which contained hidden excitement, her expression softened a little. "Are you okay? The battlefield is too chaotic. How dare you run around?" Yang Si's job was mental work. The fighting and killing could be left to the martial arts. If anything happened to Yang Si, the team, which was already short of people, would be even more lacking. Jinmen district had already been conquered. There would be many things to be busy with in the future. They could not afford to lose manpower at this time. Yang Si did not know Jiang Pengji's thoughts. He thought that she was concerned about him, and his heart suddenly warmed up. Just now, he called her Lord willingly. "Thank you for your concern, my lord. I'm fine." Other than the pain in his thighs from riding the horse, he was fine. He had also experienced the addiction of charging and breaking through enemy lines. The gentleman's martial arts that he had learned in the past were not useless. Jiang Pengji's voice was calm. Has the battlefield been cleaned up? How many wounded are there? How many captives? Did anyone take the opportunity to cause trouble? Chapter 638. Jiang Pengji's side had the upper hand, but as the attacking party without any siege equipment, it was already very good to have such an outcome. She said, now that the weather is cold, the corpses won't rot easily. Collect the corpses of the soldiers and send them back. According to the customs of war, the corpses of soldiers were usually disposed of on the spot. Firstly, there were too many corpses, and it was not easy to move them. Secondly, the weather was not good, so it was difficult to preserve the corpses. There were many accidents during the march, so it was inconvenient to bring the corpses along. However, the weather was cold, and the corpses would not rot so easily. Jiang Pengji planned to send them back to their hometown instead of burying them in a foreign land. Yang Xi's eyes widened slightly, as if he was surprised by Jiang Pengji's decision. After a while, he said in a low voice, yes. The situation in Jinmen district was far poorer than Jiang Pengji had imagined. The houses were dilapidated and low, and the doors of every household were tightly shut. Occasionally, there would be people looking out through the crack in the door. If Jiang Pengji's gaze swept over them, they would immediately shrink their heads back. Jiang Pengji formulated a strict military order. The troops were not allowed to disturb the people during battles. If they violated the order, they would be punished according to military law. Let the soldiers rest for a while, eat something, and recover their strength. We will go back and act according to plan. Jiang Pengji heaved a sigh of relief and thought about the battle plan she had formulated. Yang Xi nodded and passed the order on behalf of Jiang Pengji. The vanguard battalion was the most elite part of the entire team, but Jinmen district had just been captured, so it was impossible to leave anyone to defend it. Therefore, before they set off, Jiang Pengji had informed Qiguan Rang and asked him to deploy more than 1,000 troops from the main army to temporarily take over Jinmen district. According to her calculations, they would be able to make it in time after they nibbled away at the Red Lotus Group's ambush and turned to Jinmen County. The Red Lotus Group's news was lagging behind, and it would take a long time for it to be transmitted. When the time came, they wanted to send troops back to Jinmen district. Not only had Su Ke's siege equipment arrived, but Jiang Pengji had also arrived at their destination with the vanguard battalion. If the Red Lotus Group wanted to attack Jinmen County, which was at its peak, they would definitely need to pile up their heads. After resting for about 4 hours, the soldiers sent by Qiguan Rang arrived. Jiang Pengji took 2 bites of her rations and drank some warm water. She mounted Little White's horse and waved her arms. Depart. Behind him, Jinmen County crawled on the ground like a giant sleeping beast, gradually disappearing into the horizon. According to the battle plan, Jiang Pengji would lead her people to hide on the mountain road leading to Jinmen County. On the other side, the troops that had been transferred from Jinmen County finally arrived at Fenghu County after some twists and turns. The strategist of the Red Lotus Group, the scholar, was almost moved to tears. Qiguan Rang provoked and threatened him again and again. The scholar always thought that he would receive news of Jiang Pengji attacking the city in the next second. He wanted to capture the scouts on Jiang Pengji's side and kill one as a warning to the others to boost their morale. However, the scouts were cunning and slippery like loaches. He could only find traces of them, but he couldn't catch them. This made the scholar angry. But now, all the troops from Jinmen County had arrived. How could the combined forces of the 2 counties not be able to hold back Lu Shi? The scholar felt a sense of security, and all of his uneasiness was dispelled. Lu Shi has gone too far. We must teach him a lesson and let him know how powerful our sacred group is. The scholar secretly clenched his teeth. The plan to outflank Lu Shi that he had previously come up with once again occupied his mind. He was very tempted. He had been frightened by the scouts for so long. Now that he had the upper hand, how could he not think of a way to get back at Lu Shi and make him lose face? Thinking of this, the scholar began to deploy troops. He dispatched more than 3,000 people to prepare a sneak attack on the small town and ambush Jiang Pengji. In the Red Lotus group, the scholar had great authority. Almost no one except the leader could order him to withdraw the plan. However, the leader of the Red Lotus group, who had led the troops from Jinmen County to support them, was dissatisfied. The leader said, "Counselor, our army has traveled all the way from Jinmen County to Fenghu County. The people are extremely tired. Why don't we give them some time to rest and reorganize?" At the mention of this, the scholar was instantly infuriated. He said righteously and sternly, "Speed is the most important thing in war, and opportunities are fleeting. If we delay opportunities for you and give Lu Shi a chance to catch his breath, should I bear the responsibility, or should you? What's more, from Jinmen County to Fenghu County, you took the official road. The road is flat. How much physical strength can you waste? I haven't even held you accountable for the crime of slow support, which almost gave Lu Shi an opportunity to take advantage of. If he hadn't been so good at hiding the truth, Lu Shi might have already known that Fenghu County's troops were insufficient. What if they attacked the city before Jinmen County's reinforcements arrived? It was already good enough that the scholar didn't hold the leader accountable, but he still wanted to rest and reorganize and delay opportunities? After hearing this, the leader's face turned from white to green, and the anger in his heart burned. If it weren't for his fear of the scholar's position in the Red Lotus group, he would have slapped him. Who gave him the courage to embarrass himself? The scholar said arbitrarily, "Gather the troops, suppress Lu Shi, and restore the prestige of our sacred group." The scholar said arbitrarily, "Gather the troops, suppress Lu Shi, and restore the prestige of our sacred group." They dreamed of annihilating Jiang Pengji and achieving great achievements. Little did they know that there were already several traps waiting for them ahead. After capturing Jinmen County, Jiang Pengji ordered the messenger to pass the news to Qiguan Rang, who was in charge of the Central Army. "I know about this. Inform the Lord and act according to the plan." When Qiguan Rang heard that Jinmen County had been captured and that the vanguard battalion led by Jiang Pengji had set off after a short rest, he felt reassured. At this time, the scouts at the front also sent back information one after another. The troops of Jinmen County had arrived at Fenghu County. Qiguan Rang raised his eyebrows and ordered the scouts to probe again. If there are signs of troops being deployed out of the city in Fenghu County, immediately report back and inform all the scouts to return. Not long after, Qiguan Rang received news from the scouts that there was movement in Fenghu County. He raised his eyebrows and sneered coldly. The strategists guarding Fenghu County were really brainless. However, it was also thanks to the other party's lack of brains. If they had brains, they would only need to delay for one more day before they would receive the news that Jinmen County had been lost. By then, they would know that all of this was a scheme, and they would be more cautious in their actions. They might even be able to reduce their losses. It was a pity that they only knew how to talk on paper and thought that the war would develop according to their expectations. Little did they know that daydreaming was beautiful, but Jiang Pengji's efficiency in war was too high. Before nightfall, Qiguan Rang retreated from the small town with his men and entered the mountain road leading to Fenghu County. He used himself as bait and pretended to attack. The scouts of the Red Lotus group, who were keeping a close eye on the movements in the small town, hurriedly passed the news back. When the scholar received the news, he was ecstatic. "The heavens are helping me. This time, I must make Thief Lu suffer a loss. Whoever can capture Thief Lu alive will be rewarded with 1,000 taels and countless beauties." According to the scholar's script, the Red Lotus Group would send heavy troops to block several exits on the mountain road and send 3,000 members out of the town to sneak in through the mountain road entrance to block Jiang Pengji's retreat. They would attack from the front and the back, besiege Jiang Pengji on the mountain road, and finally capture her alive. Chapter 639. The scholar's script was indeed perfect, but unfortunately, he had taken the wrong one. A cannon fodder with a low IQ wanted to enjoy the treatment of a protagonist? When the sky gradually darkened, all was silent except for the whistling of the mountain wind. Qiguan Rang, who had already led his men into the mountain road, looked at the topographic map and pointed to a mountain wall. "It's here." As soon as he finished speaking, the soldiers behind him piled up the boulders that had already been found there, blocking the road to Fenghu County. He did this because he was worried that the Red Lotus Group would split their troops into two groups, one from the exit and the other from the entrance. Now, Qiguan Rang had blocked the road to the exit and was relying on this to block the ambush on the road leading to the exit. He wanted to see who was the turtle that was caught in the urn. With the efforts of the soldiers, the stone wall had been piled up inside the mountain road in less than an hour. Qiguan Rang ordered the soldiers to rest in batches and recuperate. Once there was a situation, they would immediately beat the military drum to alert. In the middle of the night, the moon in the sky emitted a cold light, and the air was bitterly cold. The temperature at night was lower than during the day, and the members of the Red Lotus Group were poor people. The proportion of people with night blindness was very high. At night, they were like blind people. Cold and blind, how could they fight this battle? They were unwilling to launch a sneak attack at night. However, the scholar was radical and would use force. If they did not obey, they would be punished by military law. Everyone had no choice but to obey. The 3,000 troops sent by the Red Lotus Group arrived in the small town and were preparing to launch a sneak attack, but they found that it was empty. The leader of the troops was uneasy, fearing that this was a trap. However, this could also be Lu Shi's evil plan. Perhaps Lu Shi wanted to sneak attack Fenghu County at night, but he didn't expect that they would stumble upon his plot by accident. When the two speculations were put together, the Red Lotus Group would naturally choose the one that was beneficial to them. So, the leader of the troops was so shocked that he slapped his thigh and suddenly realized, it must be Lu Shi who wants to attack the city at night. The lackey beside him said flatteringly, "It must be so. It's just that Lu Shi is ignorant and stupid. He doesn't know that our sacred group is blessed by the gods and that all crises can be easily solved. Lu Shi is just a mortal. How can he be compared with the heavenly soldiers and generals of the sacred group?" With the lackey's words, the leader was in a good position. His face darkened as he said, "Chase after him. Capture that traitor Lu alive." Little did they know, a pair of black and bright eyes were hiding under the cover of the night, quietly watching them. The scouts found out that Jiang Pengji was lying in ambush on the other side of the mountain path. "My lord, they have already entered the mountain path." Jiang Pengji held a blade of withered grass in her mouth and fed Little White with a basin in her other hand. The surrounding soldiers were taking turns to rest and recuperate. Only when they had enough strength and energy would they be able to fight. The mountain path was very windy, and the temperature was very low. Their warm clothes were somewhat useless, so they could only huddle together to keep warm. Although it was somewhat miserable, compared to the Red Lotus Group, it was still extremely good treatment. Hearing the news from the scouts, she nodded and ordered her men to gather all the soldiers. Dian Yen was swift and decisive. He carried out Jiang Pengji's orders without any hesitation. The situation on Jiang Pengji's side was far better than that of the Red Lotus Group. The mountain path was rugged and long. When the majority of the troops had entered the mountain path, the leader of the Red Lotus Group ordered torches to be lit. According to the script, they had already blocked the exit and entrance of the mountain path. Now that they had lit the torches, they were not afraid of being discovered by Jiang Pengji. So what if they found out? There was no way out in front and no way out behind. Thief Lu could not escape even if he grew wings. With the light and warmth of the torches, the Red Lotus group advanced more smoothly. Their speed had also increased by a large margin. Qiguan Rang had long been prepared. He placed a man at a certain distance. Qiguan Rang didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he learned that the Red Lotus group was using torches to illuminate the area. The other side was truly fearless. Did they really think that they could eat them up? Aren't you afraid of choking to death? The mountain road was narrow and could only allow 2 carriages to travel side by side. If the Red Lotus group had caught them off guard, they might have suffered losses. Now that they had brazenly lit their torches, it was obvious that they were telling the enemies who had been ambushed, "Little ones, I'm coming." He wasn't sick, but there was a hole in his brain. A sneak attack should have the quality of a sneak attack. Qiguan Rang order all battalions to prepare to defend against the enemy. The mountain road was narrow, and the advantage in numbers was not of much use. Qiguan Rang was in charge of the main army. As the lieutenant of the Right Army, Li Yun's main responsibility was to protect the main army and coordinate with the vanguard battalion. Jiang Pengji and Dian Yen were in the vanguard battalion, so Li Yun was left behind to assist the main army. Upon receiving Qiguan Rang's order, he had a few rows of soldiers hold shields and form the first line of defense to prevent the Red Lotus group from using long-range arrows to injure people. Then, the crossbowmen would shoot from behind to block the fiercest wave of sneak attacks. If the enemy used the tactic of corpses to break through this line of defense, or if they ran out of arrows, there would be soldiers armed with long spears to fill in the gaps. This would buy time and ensure that the main army's line of defense would not be broken. The mountain road was special. Many large pieces of equipment could not be brought along. They could only rely on the cooperation between different types of soldiers to form lines of defense. Fortunately, every soldier was well trained, and the cooperation between them was a permanent part of their daily training. Their side was solemnly waiting, but the Red Lotus group was still daydreaming. Little did they know that there was a fierce wolf in front of them, waiting to strike, and a fierce tiger behind them, eyeing them covetously. The vanguard battalion led by Jiang Pengji slowly approached the target. To prevent exposure, the distance between each other was a little long. As soon as the first wave of confrontation between the Red Lotus group and the main army broke out, the vanguard battalion would immediately launch a sneak attack from the rear. Dian Yen gritted his molars nervously. Thick blue veins popped out on his forehead. It was the dead of winter, and his face was covered in hot sweat. Jiang Pengji said in a low voice, "Don't be nervous. This is just a small battle. With me here, nothing will go wrong." Dian Yen tried to slow down his breathing and slowly adjust his state of mind. When the cold wind blew, his hot sweat turned into cold sweat. It was so cold that he shivered. On the mountain road, the members of the Red Lotus group could only hear the howling mountain wind and the footsteps of people walking. Occasionally, gravel rolled down, making a rustling sound. No matter how long the road was, there would always be an end, not to mention that the mountain road leading to Fenghu County was not long. The messenger reported, "There's a situation ahead. Thief Lu and his group seem to have discovered the traces of our group." The leader was not surprised. He laughed and scolded, "We're holding torches. If they didn't discover us, they'd be blind. So what if they've put on a battle formation? It's just a last-ditch struggle. Brothers, go. Capture Thief Lu alive. 1,000 taels of silver, countless beauties, whatever you want." As long as they attracted Lu Shi's main firepower, the brothers in Fenghu County would sneak in from the exit of the mountain road and launch a sneak attack on Lu Shi's weaker rear. Then, they would surround Thief Lu so that he would not be able to take care of both the front and the back. Wouldn't that be wonderful? However, there was a saying that went, "Dreams are plentiful, but reality is harsh." How could a sinister guy like Qiguan Rang not have a backup plan? Did you see the stone wall he had people pile up? Were you surprised? Were you surprised? Chapter 640. As a non-mainstream streamer, Jiang Pengji's daily live stream was as punctual as if she was clocking in at work. If she suddenly started streaming in the middle of the night one day, there was no doubt that she would stir up some trouble. There was no shortage of night owls with a rich nightlife in the world. Jiang Pengji had just started streaming, and the audience seats were full in less than a second. Zisa Junyan, the streaming room is actually starting in the middle of the night. How rare. Simia Mayawo, as a loyal fan of the streaming room, every time I start streaming in the middle of the night, something always happens. This time should be no exception. But where is this place? Why is it so dark? If I hadn't turned on the infrared panoramic view, I wouldn't have been able to see anything. Xiaoye Jiawa, looking at the image, it should be the mountain road during the day. Tonight's program is a night attack to outflank the Red Lotus group. MOU's Fangmei, dumplings? Dumpling fillings with the flavor of the Red Lotus group? Jiang Pengji didn't explain much. She just briefly introduced the situation. She started an extra live stream tonight, not for the audience, but to make use of the camera in the streaming room. As mentioned before, the camera in the streaming room could be rotated without any blind spots. It was positioned directly above Jiang Pengji's head, and the angle of view moved as she moved. In addition, the height and angle of the camera could be adjusted. The captured image could be seen not only by the audience in the streaming room, but also by Jiang Pengji. Using this angle of view, Jiang Pengji could easily control the overall situation and grasp the movements of the Red Lotus group. As for the live stream, that was just incidental. With the camera 100 meters above the ground and the continuous information sent back by the scouts, Jiang Pengji had a rough idea. "My lord, when do we attack?" Dian Yen asked in a low voice, looking eager to try. The axes in his hands were already hungry and thirsty. This time, Jiang Pengji didn't ask him for weapons. Dian Yen could finally kill to his heart's content. Jiang Pengji said, "Wait." Dian Yen was surprised. Wait for what? The Red Lotus group had only dispatched 3,000 troops, but the strength of the Central Army was not as strong as the vanguard. If they delayed for too long, they might be overturned. When they fight with Wenjing and attract the firepower of the main force, we will attack from the rear. They will be in a mess. If we attack now, they will react and fight while retreating. If Wenjing's side pursues them, it will be difficult for them to maintain their formation, and it will be easy for trouble. If that was the case, the Red Lotus group would be determined to break out of the encirclement. If their attacks were too fierce, they might really be able to escape. The prey that Jiang Pengji set her eyes on always had only one ending. If she let her prey escape, where would she put her dignity as a hunter? Dian Yen nodded. At this moment, Jiang Nongqin had already arranged everything properly and came to report. Jiang Pengji asked her, "Has the wounded been dealt with properly?" Jiang Nongqin replied, "Two of them affected their wounds, causing their wounds to split open. However, the situation is not serious. There are military doctors taking care of them." Most of the military doctors were female soldiers with better medical skills in the female battalion. Due to the influence of the environment, Jiang Pengji did not expand the scale of the women's battalion at will. From the beginning to the end, it was still a battalion. Jiang Pengji had her own reasons for the slow increase in the number of female troops and the lack of large-scale expansion. Firstly, there were too few women applying for the recruitment. This was the most fundamental reason. Secondly, Jiang Pengji was also intentionally controlling the number of people. The female battalion was more focused on quality than quantity. After all, the reproduction of the population required women to give birth. It was impossible to let all women go to the battlefield to kill the enemy. Moreover, not all women were eager to stand out. Women with such a strong desire were often deeply hurt. In fact, most women preferred a stable life and liked to stay at home to support their husbands and raise their children. Everyone had their own aspirations. Jiang Pengji did not force them. Thirdly, although Jiang Pengji was unwilling to think about it, women were indeed not as convenient as men in terms of physiology. For example, menstruation. Marching to war was not child's play. The enemy would not be lenient to you just because you were a woman or because your body was inconvenient. In fact, the enemy would only be crueler. They would take advantage of your weakness to kill you. If one did not pick the soft persimmon to pinch, would they look for those who were difficult to chew? Based on various realities, while Jiang Pengji focused on the development of the female battalion's strength, she also carefully considered other factors. If the female battalion had physiological inconveniences, they could temporarily be transferred to the logistics to deal with the miscellaneous items in the military camp. Those with good medical skills could enter the medical area and take on jobs similar to nurses or doctors to take care of the wounded. It could solve the problems of the female soldiers and reduce the pressure in other areas. Jiang Nongqin managed the female battalion very well and had a good reputation. Regardless of how the outside world viewed the female battalion, at least the soldiers under Jiang Pengji were friendly to the female battalion. Jiang Nongqin's efforts were indispensable for the current development. Order the female battalion to coordinate with the attack and cover the vanguard battalion to clear the way. Jiang Nongqin said in a powerful and resonant voice, "Yes, sir." On the narrow mountain path, the face of the leader of the Red Lotus group was so dark that ink seemed to drip from it. According to his script, Qiguan Rank's side should have hastily responded to the battle, then they would be slaughtered to the point of abandoning their helmets and armor. As soon as they saw each other, they would scatter in all directions. They would never be so calm and composed. The script was wrong. How did Thief Lu do it? Whether it was defending or attacking, he was calm and composed. After the battle started, one by one, their side fell. On the other hand, the other side was at two extremes. They were well prepared. The shields that blocked the arrows were densely packed and could not be broken through for a while. If they wanted to advance, the arrows in front of them were like a tide. Whoever dared to rush forward would be pierced into a hedgehog. For a moment, the two sides were in a stalemate. The Red Lotus group had lost hundreds of corpses before they could barely advance 4 or 5 feet. Bah! I'd like to see how many arrows they have. Send out the signal. We'll attack from both sides and capture Thief Lu alive. A soldier of the Red Lotus group obeyed the order. He picked up a heavy bow, ignited a fire arrow, and shot a few arrows into the sky. For the convenience of transmitting orders, they agreed to use the fire arrow as the signal. However, the mountain path was steep, and the arrows could not fly too high. The Red Lotus group had also specially arranged for scouts to observe the fire arrow. Qiguan Rang also saw it, and a malicious smile appeared at the corner of his lips. Stupid! By doing so, he not only informed his companions but also Jiang Pengji. Sure enough, it didn't take long for another wave of commotion and battle cries to be heard from behind. The leader of the Red Lotus group was horrified. He turned his head to look behind him. What was going on? Why did Thief Lu's troops appear behind them? Could it be that their flawless plan had been leaked, and Thief Lu had been vigilant and had set up a trap for him to jump into? For a moment, all kinds of speculations occupied his mind. In a daze, there were only floating blurry shadows and swaying human heads in front of him. No! He had already sent out the signal to gather and attack. Why did Thief Lu's troops in front not cause trouble? What had gone wrong? They had agreed to cooperate with Thief Lu. Where did the reinforcements from Fenghu County go? Where did they go? They were blocked by the stone wall that Qiguan Rang had built. It would be very difficult to cross this thick and heavy stone wall. What was even more sinister was that Qiguan Rang had ordered the archers to lie in ambush on the other side of the stone wall. If one came, shoot one. If a pair came, shoot a pair. Chapter 641. The Red Lotus group was completely dumbfounded this time. The people guarding the exit anxiously waited for the fire arrows to appear so that they could attack Thief Lu's army from both sides. However, when they finally rushed over, they discovered that the path in front of them was blocked by piled-up stone walls. Arrows continued to shoot down from above the stone walls. Some members of the Red Lotus group were caught off guard and were pierced by the arrows. Fresh blood filled the air and dyed the yellow-brown ground. Faint shouts of "kill" came from behind the stone wall. The Red Lotus group, who had come to provide support, realized that they had been tricked. Qiguan Rang was calm and collected. He helped Li Yun defend the front line while commanding the archers on the stone wall to resist the strong enemy. Because the mountain path was narrow, Little White's body could not move easily. Therefore, Jiang Pengji gave up fighting on horseback. She held her spear and planned to fight on foot. The archers of the vanguard battalion killed a wave of enemies first. When the distance between the two sides narrowed, they drew their swords and engaged in close combat. They had to defeat this wave of enemies before the Red Lotus group broke through the defense of the stone wall. Otherwise, Qiguan Rang's central army would be in danger. During the melee, the crowd was too chaotic. Jiang Pengji quickly disappeared, but those with good eyesight saw her. It was clearly a melee, but she could always find a gap. She either stabbed the enemy's fatal spot with her spear, or crushed the enemy's throat from behind, or stepped on the enemy's shoulder or head and rushed into the enemy's group. Wherever the silver light passed, blood splattered. She had a strong sense of combat. Whether it was an open spear or a hidden arrow, they could not get close to her. Jiang Pengji took a moment to glance. Her long leg kicked a person's heart, and she used the force to jump high. She stepped onto the cliff of the mountain path and leaped sideways. At the same time, her spear was not idle. It stabbed, entangled, blocked, pounced, and pointed. Cold stars twinkled, silver light flashed, and the snow-white shadow of the spear was accompanied by blood. The Red Lotus group had also discovered such a killer. However, Jiang Pengji's style of using offense as defense was truly frightening. It was not that they did not want to kill Jiang Pengji, but they were afraid of being killed. It seemed that no matter how many people pounced on her, they would eventually lie down, leaving a bloody hole in their bodies. Jiang Pengji charged straight in one direction. Dian Yan, who was behind her, did not know whether to laugh or cry, but he could not allow Jiang Pengji to act recklessly. While paying attention to Jiang Pengji's situation, he led the troops to charge forward and kill the enemy. Jiang Nongqin led the women's battalion and coordinated from the side. At the same time, she blocked the Red Lotus group's retreat. The two sides fought fiercely. Shouts, screams, howls of pain, and the muffled sounds of sharp weapons piercing through flesh, all that was left were broken limbs and wreckage. Almost everyone who was standing had become a soul collector. Their faces, clothes, sleeves, weapons, shoes, there was not a single spot that was not stained with blood. The pungent and sticky smell permeated the silent mountain path. On the other side, the Red Lotus group on the other side of the stone wall also gradually had the intention to retreat. The archers were truly too powerful. Not only were they accurate, but their arrows also had a long range. They tried to attack several times, but each time, they couldn't stand firm. Instead, they left behind hundreds of corpses. Under such circumstances, what else could they not understand? They had all fallen into the enemy's trap. "General, what should we do now? What should we do? What can I do?" The height of the stone wall was not high, but for them, it was like a natural moat. If they did not care about the losses and forced their way through, they could break through, but the losses were too great, and the leader already had the intention to retreat. He took a few deep breaths and looked in the direction of the stone wall with a sinister gaze. He thought for a long time. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, "Retreat." Retreat? The people around him were stunned. If they retreated, what would happen to their brothers on the other side of the stone wall? "If we don't retreat, are we going to continue to court death? Are you blind? This is a trap targeted at us. If we force our way through, we will be courting death." More importantly, the losses had already been incurred. If they continued to attack, the losses would be even greater. What if they were held accountable? To everyone's surprise, the Red Lotus group, who had been summoned by the rocket, attacked several times without any results. They actually left behind hundreds of corpses and retreated. When Qiguan Rang heard the news, he was astonished. At the same time, he relaxed his anxious heart. If they continued to attack, the Central Army would be fighting on both sides, and the pressure on the defense would be great. He was confident that he could persevere, but the number of casualties was hard to say. Now that they had retreated, it meant that they had completely given up on the 3,000 Red Lotus group members who had come to ambush them. He could make dumplings with peace of mind. Before he could send someone to shout the news and strike a blow to the enemy's confidence, a series of shouts came from the front. "The enemy has been beheaded." Jiang Pengji rushed all the way from the point where the two armies met to the center of the Red Lotus group, leaving behind countless corpses. Her red clothes and silver armor were dyed the color of blood. It was as if she had been soaked in a pool of blood for a night. Her face was covered in sticky blood. Jiang Pengji rushed toward the enemy's leader. At first, she didn't know who the leader was, but he was too stupid. He kept shouting for others to protect him, so Jiang Pengji knew that he was the leader. She used the spear to shake off the guy who was blocking her way. With a flick of her wrist, the spear left her hand and pierced through his throat. Until the last moment, his widened eyes were still filled with panic and disbelief. Dian Yen led his men to attack from the rear. With the coordination of the women's battalion, the long axe danced, cutting melons and vegetables along the way. If Jiang Pengji's killing was considered artistic, then Dian Yan's was only brutal. To quote the words of the live-stream viewers, "If I swing my axe, your body may be separated from your family." As for Jiang Nongqin, she still used her usual ruthless methods. Compared to fighting on horseback, she was more suitable for fighting on foot. Jiang Pengji's voice spread throughout the mountain road. The people of the Red Lotus group had long been killed to the point that their morale was wavering. The morale of the army was shaken, and there was little will to fight. Coupled with Jiang Pengji's voice, they threw away their helmets and abandoned their armor. They no longer had the will to fight. Once someone chose to surrender to save their life, this depressed atmosphere spread like a virus. With one, there would naturally be a second and a third. These soldiers of the Red Lotus group had no sense of honor, let alone fight to the death. Now that the situation was hopeless, they naturally wouldn't struggle to the death. There was a way out if they surrendered. If they stubbornly resisted, what awaited them would be death. Qiguan Rang looked at the battle situation that had been decided and let out a long sigh of relief. Capturing captives and cleaning up the battlefield, Jiang Pengji had delegated these tasks to others. Qiguan Rang instructed everyone, tidied up his appearance, and then went to see Jiang Pengji. "My lord." Jiang Pengji glanced at Qiguan Rang and said with a smile, "Did the scene just now scare Wenjing?" To put it bluntly, Qiguan Rang's main army was the bait to delay Fenghu County. If they weren't careful, they might lose their lives. Qiguan Rang said, What's there to be afraid of in such a small scene? Even if his life was at stake, Qiguanrang didn't show any anxious emotions. His mental fortitude was excellent. Clean up the battlefield. There's no time for the soldiers to rest and reorganize. We must rush back to Jinmen County as soon as possible. Chapter 642. The sneak attack had failed and they had been surrounded instead. When the news of the Red Lotus Group's defeat reached Fenghu County, the scholar was stunned. A moment ago, he had been happily waiting for his subordinates to escort Lu Shi over. In the next second, he had lost his soul. What did you say? The scholar strode forward and grabbed the messenger's collar. His face was ferocious and his eyes were wide open. Anger burned in his chest. He felt that he must have heard wrong or that the messenger had given the wrong information. How could they have been defeated? The messenger had difficulty breathing as he was lifted by the collar. He was also frightened by the scholar. Who would have thought that the usually gentle and thin military counselor could be so terrifying when he was angry? However, he still had to say what needed to be said. He stammered and repeated the news. Not only did the 3,000 troops sent by the Red Lotus Group fail to capture Lu Shi, but they were also surrounded on the mountain road and annihilated. The scholar was so angry that he clenched his teeth. He was so angry and resentful that he threw the messenger to the ground. Something was wrong. The scholar was about to gather his troops to get back at them when he suddenly remembered something. Wait. Although Lu Shi's troops are strong and can indeed defeat our 3,000 valiant generals, what about the people outside? If the troops outside had rushed into the mountain road to fight, they would not have been defeated like this. The messenger's face turned pale. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He knelt on the ground and crawled, not daring to get up. Seeing this, the scholar knew that there was an inside story. The audacious messenger had concealed the information. He scolded him sternly, "Tell me quickly, what happened? If there is even half a word of falsehood, the gods will punish you and your entire clan will be annihilated." The messenger was so scared that he could not stop trembling. He spat out everything. "Military counselor, Lu Shi is really treacherous. It's not that we didn't go to rescue him." The messenger was so scared that he confessed the information that he had concealed without hesitation. However, the content of the information had been edited. Although the scholar did not have much knowledge, he was very cruel and jealous. If he knew the truth, many people would have to bear the consequences. They had no choice but to think of ways to push the blame onto Jiang Pengji to lessen their own responsibilities. If the scholar was angry, he would vent his anger on Jiang Pengji. Small fries like them would be spared. After the general discovered the abnormality, he led his troops into the mountain path to provide assistance. How could he have known that traitor Lu was so cunning? He had already blocked that part of the mountain path and sent hundreds of archers to stand by on the stone wall. The general tried to attack several times. Hundreds of his brothers died, but they still couldn't shake the Lu clan's defense line. At this moment, the brothers inside could no longer hold on. For the sake of the other brothers, the general had no choice but to fall back. Otherwise, he wouldn't have abandoned his brothers so easily. "Counselor, please understand, you must avenge your brothers." Hearing this explanation, the scholar was so angry that he almost had a heart attack. Of course, that wasn't the only thing that had infuriated him. The blow that had caused the scholar to ascend to the heavens hadn't ended just yet. The scholar used all his strength to suppress his anger. His mind was blank, and he couldn't think of any countermeasure to get back at him. Obviously, Thief Lu's deployment should have seen through their tricks, and the other party was already on guard. If they used a sneak attack again, it was destined to be ineffective. As he thought about it, a small leader staggered in from outside and shouted, "Counselor, bad news." "What bad news?" "I'm fine." The scholar frowned. His already chaotic heart was even more irritated by this person's interruption, like a ball of yarn that couldn't be sorted out. He said, "Tell me, what happened? If it's not important, I'll definitely punish you." The small leader had run all the way here and was already panting from exhaustion and sweating profusely. Hearing the scholar's words, he suddenly had the urge to cry but had no tears. He said uncomfortably, "Counselor, Jinmen district has been lost." Huh? Everyone present was dumbfounded. The scholar almost thought that he was hallucinating. "What did you say was lost?" The small leader caught his breath and said in tears, "Jinmen district has been captured by thief Lu." The scholar's eyelids twitched uncontrollably, and he gradually panicked. However, he still said resolutely, "That's impossible. Thief Lu was almost right under our noses. How could he have the manpower to attack Jinmen district? Lying about military intelligence, do you know your crime?" The small leader was burning with anxiety. He said, "It's true. Yesterday morning, Thief Lu suddenly led troops to attack Jinmen district. Not long after, he lost. Countless brothers were killed and captured. If this lowly one says anything false, let the god strike this lowly one to death. Jinmen district was really lost?" The scholar's heart sank to the bottom of a lake. His hands and feet were cold, and he was so shocked that he forgot how to breathe. "Impossible, this is impossible." Thief Lu's target was clearly Fenghu district. He had been sending scouts to probe. How could he have extra manpower to go to Jinmen district? When did he go? If Jinmen district was captured by Thief Lu, how could he have had enough troops to surround and ambush them in the middle of the night? The scholar couldn't figure out the key point. There was no time at all. Either Thief Lu had descended from the heavens and created something out of nothing, like an immortal technique like casting beans to form soldiers. That was how he won. Or Lu Shi had brought more than 10,000 troops with him. There must have been other troops that had been secretly hidden. The scholar was shocked out of his wits by the news one after another. For a moment, he didn't suspect An Shui. Regardless of whether the scholar suspected or not, An Shui, the ruthless and evil guy, had stirred up a wave of trouble. "Military counselor, what should we do now?" The group of subordinates looked at each other. The scholar shuddered violently. With a cold expression, he said, "Gather the troops and return to Jinmen district. Thief Lu's main force is still here. If we take the official road, we can definitely reach Jinmen district before Thief Lu. There are still our people and believers in Jinmen district. We can take it down if we work together." It was rare for the scholar to be smart for once. If everything went according to his plan, and they were fast enough, they might be able to take back Jinmen district. After all, the Red Lotus group had been operating in Jinmen district for a long time. Many people hated them to the bone, but there were also many people who were deeply bewitched. They believed in the gods in their hearts and worshipped them every day. Jiang Pengji had just taken over Jinmen district. There were not many troops left behind, and her power was unstable. As long as the Red Lotus group reached Jinmen district before her, it would be hard to tell who would win or lose. However, the scholar's opponent was Jiang Pengji, who was definitely a person of action. She was known as the master of rhythm on the battlefield. Did he want to compete with her in speed? He. On the other side, Jiang Pengji rushed back with her troops. Su Ku was her personal accountant, private warehouse manager, and invisible chief strategist. His tacit understanding with Jiang Pengji was not just for show. The siege equipment arrived at Jinmen district almost at the same time as her. Chapter 643. Although the mountain road was difficult to travel, the overall length was much shorter than the official road. In addition, Jiang Pengji was very strict with the training of the soldiers, so this level of rapid travel was nothing at all. As soon as they arrived, the siege equipment prepared by Su Ku arrived one after another. Qiguan Rang smiled and said, "It seems that Xiaoyu trusts my lord very much." Yang Xi's expression was complicated. He said, if he didn't trust her, this batch of siege equipment wouldn't have been delivered so quickly. The equipment was large and difficult to transport. The speed was certainly not as fast as Jiang Pengji's simple and rapid march. To grasp the time accurately, it was necessary to take into account the variables on the road and the speed of the transportation of manpower. At the same time, it was necessary to be extremely confident. What confidence? If Jiang Pengji did not conquer Jinmen district according to the plan, this batch of siege equipment would have been given to the Red Lotus group. What was the result? Jiang Pengji conquered Jinmen district and even cooperated with Qiguan Rang to ambush the Red Lotus group's troops in a very short time. Finally, they returned to Jinmen district before the Red Lotus group could react. It seemed to have only taken 2 days, but the energy consumed was unimaginable to ordinary people. If Su Ku did not have 100% trust in Jiang Pengji, how could this batch of equipment be delivered in such a timely manner? Jiang Pengji comforted Little White, who was panting a little impatiently, and ordered people to send it the best food. Let's go into the city and discuss the next step of the plan. According to the plan, the next step should be to attack Chuyu district, but this time it was not as easy as attacking Jinmen district. After 2 consecutive days of marching and fighting, they only took turns to rest for half a night. Now the people and horses were tired, and their combat power was not as strong as at the beginning. Jiang Pengji felt that it was necessary to have a deep discussion with the strategists about how to attack Chuyu district and how to fight this battle. However, with such an unreasonable lord, the strategists expressed that it was very difficult. They only asked one question: if they made a plan, would the lord obediently follow it? However, the battlefield was changing rapidly. No matter how good a plan was, it could not keep up with the changes. They would not force Jiang Pengji to follow it. As for Chuyu district, Yang Xi and the others naturally had their own plans. Qiguan Rang advocated using Jinmen district as a stronghold to contain the elites and main forces of the Red Lotus group, and sending other people to attack Chuyu district. Yang Xi frowned and said, "That won't do. The situation in Jinmen County isn't stable, and many people have been bewitched by the cult. If these people work together with the Red Lotus group outside, it will definitely cause us great trouble. If the city falls, our lives will be in danger." Jiang Pengji agreed with Yang Xi. To her, if her territory was taken away, she could still fight back. If her counselor died because of this, who would compensate her? Qiguan Rang said, "Could it be that my lord doesn't trust Rang?" Jiang Pengji felt wronged. How could she not trust Qiguan Rang? Since my lord trusts Rang, let me give this matter a try. Jinmen County was a good start. If they could take down Chuyu County in one go, the morale of the Red Lotus group would be greatly damaged, and it was very likely that they would not be able to recover from this setback. This is a great opportunity for my lord to reclaim Chengde County. Qiguan Rang was usually cautious and kept a low profile, but his battle style was the complete opposite. He was treacherous and bold, seeking victory in the midst of danger. If Jiang Pengji had a strong gambler's mentality, Qiguan Rang was no different. It was not without reason that the two of them could regard each other as confidants and have similar interests. He had taken the initiative to make this suggestion. He wanted to order 3,000 to 5,000 troops to defend Jinmen County and delay the main force of the Red Lotus group. It was extremely bold. However, behind his boldness was his confidence in his own strength. Jiang Pengji could not say that Qiguan Rang was wrong, so she could only sigh and nod in agreement. In that case, you can give it a try. If you can't defend it, you should prioritize your life and retreat in time. Don't force yourself. There are still a pile of official documents waiting for you to go back and deal with in Fengyi County. Without Wenjing to share the burden, won't the others be exhausted to death? Jiang Pengji did not decline pretentiously. Saying a few words was a sign of concern. If she declined too much, it would be questioning his strength. She had always respected the strong. In her opinion, the strong did not have supreme martial strength. A strong mind, strong martial strength, and strong wisdom, could all be called strong. Qiguan Rang's martial strength stopped at the level of a square dance with a sword, but who could say that he was weak? A strong brain was also a strong person. At first, Qiguan Rang was very touched. His heart was so warm that he wanted to cry. When he heard Jiang Pengji's words, he wondered if it was illegal to kill his master. His heart felt so cold. Yang Si secretly rolled his eyes. He knew that Jiang Pengji was not a kind person. She was a black-hearted boss who brainlessly exploited her employees. Before Qiguan Rang could not control himself and was about to kill his master, Jiang Pengji said with a serious face, "The important task of guarding Jinmen County will be handed over to Wenjing. Given that the Red Lotus Group has a large number of people, I will only take 4,000 troops with me this time. The rest will stay in Jinmen County." When he heard this number, Qiguan Rang showed a look of disapproval. How could a mere 4,000 people take down Qiuyu County, which had an abundance of troops? Jiang Pengji said, 4,000 people is not a small number. We have brought enough siege equipment with us. We don't have to worry about not being able to take down a county. Not to mention that we have spies within the Red Lotus Group. They will definitely play a role at critical moments. It will not be difficult to take down Qiuyu County with us working together. She took 4,000 people with her, which meant that Qiguan Rang only had 6,000 people left, but he had to face 10,000 to 20,000 enemies. Qiguan Rang wanted to say more, but he was stopped by Jiang Pengji. At that moment, there was a messenger outside who wanted to deliver a message. Jiang Pengji promised, and a soldier ran in. He was half kneeling on the ground, holding a roll of bamboo slips with both hands. "My lord, this is a letter sent by a child beggar." A letter sent by a child beggar? Jiang Pengji did not mind that it was dirty. She picked up the roll of worn-out, gray bamboo slips and unfolded it. She was instantly amused. She asked, "Where is the child beggar now? Quickly bring him here." "What a good Shui, you did a good job." The messenger said, "The child beggar is waiting outside the residence." Yang Si and Qiguan Rang looked at each other, not knowing what had happened. At the same time, the three generals, Li Yun, Dian Yan, and Jiang Nongqin, were also urgently summoned to the hall. When the three of them arrived, they saw a thin child beggar in ragged clothes kneeling in the hall. His hair was unkempt and his face was dirty. Only his eyes were black and bright. Jiang Nongqin sat down in her seat silently. Dian Yan also did not say a word. Only Li Yun was slightly curious. "My lord, who is this person?" "A great hero," Jiang Pengji said with a smile. She ordered the child beggar to tell her everything in detail. The child beggar did not have stage fright. He spoke in an orderly manner. It turned out that after Jiang Pengji conquered the small town, Shui found an excuse to leave Jinmen District and rushed to Red Lotus District. Why did he go to Red Lotus District? Naturally, it was to cooperate with Jiang Pengji and create opportunities for her. The leader of the Red Lotus Group boasted that he was a deity who had descended to the world to save the common people. In reality, he was wearing the skin of a deity to cheat the people of their money. He was extravagant and lascivious. He wanted nothing more than to monopolize everything. Since the loot was not distributed evenly, there would naturally be people who were unhappy. Shui had given advice to the scholar several times, allowing the scholar to be in the limelight. The scholar deliberately suppressed Shui and did not let him appear in front of the leader of the Red Lotus Group, but some people with ulterior motives noticed it. Chapter 644. And Shui had always known that there was discord within the Red Lotus group. He had tried to understand it in depth, but at that time, he had no capital and could not win over anyone. He had been in the Red Lotus group for some time, but he could not climb to a higher position. Naturally, he could not investigate further. With Jiang Pengji's financial support, An Shui was good at managing connections. He was like a tiger that had grown wings. Soon, he became a small leader that attracted much attention. The scholar asked him many times for advice and asked An Shui to be the gunman. However, the scholar did not recommend An Shui to the chief as he had promised. Instead, he suppressed him, intentionally or unintentionally. An Shui did not care at first. He did not expect to attract a big fish. This big fish was the second-in-command of the Red Lotus group. He boasted of going through fire and water with the chief, but in the end, he could not compare to a villain who only knew how to flatter. He had always regarded the scholar as a thorn in his side. If that was the case, it would have been fine. However, the cult leader only cared about himself and did not even let his brother have a sip of the meat soup. This made the second-in-command extremely unhappy, and he bore a grudge against the scholar and the Red Lotus cult leader. The second-in-command wanted to pull the scholar down and replace the chief's position, but he never had the chance. An Shui's appearance gave the second-in-command hope. He began to contact An Shui in secret, repeatedly sowing discord between An Shui and the scholar, and promised him a handsome reward. An Shui was well aware of this, but he pretended to be deaf and dumb. He secretly tested the man's true intentions. After testing, he saw it, dozed off, and found a pillow. It was too wonderful for words. In the end, they hit it off and decided to stir things up. This beggar was the messenger that An Shui had secretly sent to inform Jiang Pengji of an important piece of news in advance. An Shui wanted to cooperate with the second-in-command. He would obey him on the surface and help him rebel against the chief of the Red Lotus group, luring them to move their troops out of Honglian district. When Honglian district's troops were empty, he would send reinforcements. Jiang Pengji could take advantage of this opportunity to enter Honglian district. When the scholar received news that the chief had been captured and imprisoned and hurriedly sent troops to stop the second-in-command, Jiang Pengji could turn around and attack Jinmen district. Finally, when the scholar and the second-in-command were almost done fighting in Qiuyu district, she would take them down. Jiang Pengji listened to the beggar's narration and could not help but frown inwardly. She still wore an appropriate amount of joy on her face. She hadn't expected An Shui to be such a drama queen. He was really good at playing as a three-faced spy. The live stream viewers listened for a long time, but they were still confused. It took them a long time to figure it out. Midsummer Mosquito Duo, the spectators are so shocked that their hands almost fell off. God An Shui's three-faced spy is really sneaky. Shivering Winter, although this plan sounds great, I'm still a little worried. Who knew if this An Shui was really willing to help the host? If he wasn't a three-pronged spy, but instead played around with three sides and was only loyal to himself, then it would be terrible. Spring loves Sleepy, I saw the previous live stream. An Shui and the host are in a cooperative relationship. There's no loyalty between them. His and the live stream's interests were aligned. An Shui would only benefit if the host benefited, so the possibility of An Shui scamming the host was very, very small. Chilly Autumn, I don't care who An Shui is loyal to. The Oscars owe him a Best Actor award for his ability as a three-faced spy. Not only did the Oscars owe An Shui a camp, but even Jiang Pengji couldn't help but want to double-click 666 to show her commendation. Although the Red Lotus group's level wasn't high, the thinking of a group of ruffians in the pugilistic world was quite strange. And Shui was able to accurately grasp their thoughts and next moves, seizing any opportunity that might benefit him. Such a person was indeed a talent. The beggar received his reward, and the strategist who had been listening at the side spoke. Qiguanrang frowned. He had always been paranoid, and he didn't trust Shui at all. Yang Si had had a brief encounter with Shui, and he also knew some things about him from Wuxia. He was more optimistic about this plan. Qiguanrang asked, "Can Shui be trusted?" Yang Si's lips curled into a faint smile, with a hint of scheming. He glanced at the goose feather fan in Qiguanrang's hand and felt a chill run down his spine. He silently averted his eyes. It doesn't matter whether he's trustworthy or not. What's important is how much benefit my lord can gain from this. Even if Yang Si has ulterior motives, he can't shake my lord's foundation. My lord can sit on top of the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Watch as the Red Lotus group splits internally, fight and exhaust each other, and finally reap the benefits. However, Jiang Pengji would rather choose to start the war during the new year. She couldn't afford to waste time. Li Yun was confused by what he heard. After a while, he said embarrassedly, "Then, sirs, are we going to watch them kill each other?" Qiguanrang raised his head and glanced at Li Yun. He said strangely, "Why wouldn't we take advantage of the situation?" Li Yun was speechless. Dian Yen pondered for a long time, deliberating his words over and over again. Only then did he speak cautiously. But if we follow this plan, I'm afraid we won't have enough manpower." Dian Yan's expression was slightly dispirited. They had dispatched more than 10,000 troops, but if the 4 districts were to fight, not only would they have to run left and right, but they would also have to be on edge. This would greatly exhaust the troops' energy and combat power. If they followed the previous plan, they would fight steadily, going one district at a time. The 10,000 troops wouldn't be too strapped for cash. However, if they cooperated with Shui's plan, it would be equivalent to fighting on multiple fronts. Their troops would be too scattered, and it wouldn't be conducive to consolidation and development. Jiang Pengji said, "We can't miss this opportunity. If we miss this opportunity, there won't be another one." Dian Yan's worries aren't without reason, so I plan to mobilize a portion of the new troops here to defend the city. This will more or less deter the Red Lotus Group's rascals. The Red Lotus Group wasn't afraid of Jiang Pengji because they felt that the latter's troops were too few. They could try to crush them. This was like a gang fight. A group of hooligans surrounded a martial arts master and wanted to gang up on him. Even if they knew that the opponent was a martial arts master, he was only one person. The hooligans would definitely be able to defeat him if they attacked together. What if the martial arts master wasn't one person, but 7 or 8? The hooligans would definitely be cautious and wouldn't dare to act rashly. Similarly, once Jiang Pengji began to increase the number of troops and the number of people, the Red Lotus Group would have to think twice if they wanted to make a move against her. Qiguanrang lowered his eyes when he heard this. His lord had an eccentric habit. If the new recruits hadn't trained for enough time and reached a certain standard, she wouldn't easily let the new recruits join the battle. The chances of new recruits with insufficient experience and ability dying in battle were too high. To her, letting immature new recruits join the battle was tantamount to sending them to their deaths. Once she let the new recruits join the battle, it meant that she had already made up her mind to accomplish something. Yang Si smiled maliciously. "If we mobilize the troops, I'm afraid Zixiao and the rest will go crazy from exhaustion." Jiang Pengji continued, "Zixiao's health isn't good. No one will tire him out. Isn't there still Fengzhen to hold the fort? Wuxia just had to do what he was supposed to do and dump the extra labor on Fengzhen." Yang Si was surprised for a moment. There was something indescribably strange in his heart. Chapter 645. The viewers in the live stream room were all veterans who were used to big storms. They laughed at the poor Feng Zhen while silently eating their dog food. Not to mention anything else, their streamer really spoiled the little princess strategist too much. Today's wait, I'm crying for Feng Zhen. He's also a sickly person. You can't bully him just because he's unrestrained. Yu Pang, holding the fresh dog food and silently nibbling on it in the corner, the streamer really spoils the little princess strategist. Road to losing weight, it's probably because Feng Zhen is too unrestrained and Simei is too obedient. Obedient children are always more likable. Elsewhere, while Jiang Pengji was toying with the Red Lotus group and wrapping up the 3,000 ambushing troops, the situation in Red Lotus district quietly changed. Let's go back in time. At that time, An Shui and the second-in-command of the Red Lotus group hit it off. The two of them colluded and caused a wave of big trouble. As a brother who had gone through life and death with the leader, the second-in-command was all too familiar with the habits of the leader. The leader was not very wary of him. When the second-in-command rushed into the deity palace, with his trusted subordinates and captured the Red Lotus group leader, the leader's strong body was pressing down on the bodies of two beautiful women. He was sweating profusely, and even when he was tied up, he was still in a daze. Looking at the second-in-command's ferocious face, then looking down at his naked black body, his cheeks alternated between red and green. Do you want to be punished by deity? The second-in-command snorted contemptuously and raised his hand to give the man a kick. You can fool those idiots with your words, but do you think you can fool me? I even know when you wet your bed, when you first ejaculated, when you peeped on widows bathing, when you flirted with young women, when you did all those things. I know all of them. How can you say you're deity when you're like this? I'm so scared. Why don't you return to your position and send celestial soldiers and generals to kill me? Can you do that? Pfft. Boasting about being the incarnation of deity? The second-in-command suppressed his anger and poured out his grievances at the leader of the Red Lotus group. He originally did not want to betray the leader of the Red Lotus group. After all, the fact that the leader of the Red Lotus group was the incarnation of deity was deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. Without the incarnation of deity, the Red Lotus group would only exist in name. Apart from the brainless believers, the other fence-sitters would soon scatter. However, he really couldn't stand his current life. Why was it that even though he had contributed so much to the sacred cult, all the benefits were enjoyed by the cult master in the end while he couldn't even get a sip of the meat soup? It was fine if he could not get the meat soup, but the leader of the Red Lotus group valued a scholar who only knew how to talk. The psychological imbalance, the disparity in treatment, and the fact that his position in the sect had not reached his expectations. Coupled with the restless ambition in his heart, these factors led him to take the risk out of desperation and imprison the leader of the Red Lotus group. He planned to turn the other party into a puppet that he could use as he pleased. The leader of the Red Lotus group was spat on by the other party. He was so angry that his entire body trembled. He cursed loudly. The spit was as stinky as a latrine pit. Don't be so arrogant. When the military advisor returns with his troops, it will be the day of your death. The second-in-command's heart skipped a beat. He felt a little weak, but he still put on a fierce front. He ordered his men to carefully imprison the leader of the Red Lotus group. The second-in-command kept pacing back and forth. Although he had long had the intention to rebel, it was just a strong thought and he had never put it into action. With An Shui's help, it was like adding wings to a tiger. However, once disloyalty was not tolerated. An Shui might betray others, but he might betray the second-in-command as well. The second-in-command seemed to put An Shui in an important position, but he was still wary and on guard. However, the current situation was a little tricky. If he did not rely on An Shui's ability, when the military advisor returned with the members of the Red Lotus group, it would be the day of his death. In order to survive, he had no choice but to continue working with Shui. The advice Shui gave him was also very pertinent. He spoke energetically and convinced the second-in-command wholeheartedly. The second-in-command had already taken down Red Lotus District, but the other 3 districts were still in the hands of the Red Lotus Group. The news of Jinmen District's fall had not yet spread. Whether in terms of manpower or territory, the second-in-command was no match for the Red Lotus Group. If he wanted to turn the tables, the second-in-command could only take advantage of the fact that the Red Lotus Group and Lu Shi were fighting fiercely to fish in troubled waters. He could quietly launch a sneak attack on the Red Lotus Group's territory and expand his power. In the end, Shui said in a bewitching tone, "At this moment, the news that you've captured the leader hasn't spread. You can take your men and horses and rush to Qiuyu district. You can use your status as the left and right protectors to deceive the county into opening the gates and welcoming you in without expending a single soldier's strength. If you don't seize this opportunity, when the news spreads throughout Qingde County, it will be difficult for you to take advantage of it. Opportunities are fleeting." The second-in-command was tempted. It wasn't that he couldn't control himself. It was clearly because Shui's tongue was as smooth as a lotus flower. He was too good at bewitching people. "What should we do about Red Lotus District?" The second-in-command was still suspicious of Shui, afraid that the other party had ulterior motives. Shui said, "That's easy. You can just leave a few trusted subordinates to guard the city. Red Lotus District is easy to defend and difficult to attack. It's difficult for outsiders to conquer it." He spoke naturally and gracefully, but the second-in-command felt embarrassed. After fooling the second-in-command, Shui did another secretive thing. He sent a beggar to inform Jiang Pengji and sent someone to Fenghu district to inform the scholar of the Red Lotus Group. The contents of the report to Jiang Pengji had already been mentioned before. The contents of the report were more meaningful. On one hand, he tearfully reprimanded the second-in-command for his wild ambition and kidnapping him to Red Lotus District. On the other hand, he said that the second-in-command planned to kidnap the leader to Qiuyu District. He hoped that the scholar would immediately come to the leader's rescue for the sake of the Red Lotus Group. The Oscars didn't owe Shui a Best Actor. It was obvious that they owed Shui an extra platoon of awards. Before the first wave had subsided, another wave arose. When the scholar of the Red Lotus Group received the message from Shui, he almost fainted. It was precisely because of this that the scholar temporarily forgot to pursue the matter of Shui's plan, causing them to lose Jinmen District. For the Red Lotus Group, the leader was their backbone. If the leader, who was the incarnation of God, was gone, the Red Lotus Group, which had been strong for a while, would definitely fall apart and be counterattacked by the Tsing-Yi army. What should they do? In the end, the scholar's eyes reddened and his voice hoarse. "Even if the leader wants to rescue us, we can't hand over Jinmen District to that traitor Lu for nothing. Let's split up." The discipline within the Red Lotus Group was lax. It would take at least 2 or 3 days to gather the troops and set off. Now that the leader had been captured by the traitor, they were even more disorganized. They were like headless flies flying around without any order, and their speed was even slower. As an opponent of the Red Lotus Group, Jiang Pengji maximized the word efficiency. By the time the Red Lotus Group had sent half of its troops to attack Jinmen District, Jiang Pengji had already secretly brought people to Red Lotus District. The recruits who had been temporarily transferred over were already halfway there, just in time to outflank the forces of the Red Lotus Group attacking Jinmen District from the rear. In Jinmen District, Qiguan Rang was in charge, and his defense was impenetrable. The Red Lotus Group's repeated attacks were fruitless. Chapter 646. There was a saying that went, "I like it when you hate me to the bone, when you're gnashing your teeth but can't do anything to me." Well, it didn't seem out of place when used on Qiguan Rang and the Red Lotus Group. Qiguan Rang kept a low profile, but that didn't mean he was low-key on the battlefield. On the contrary, he was quite flamboyant. When defending the city, the enemy couldn't get in. When attacking the city, it was impossible to guard against. Even though the military strength in the city was insufficient and there were many brainless believers who caused trouble, Qiguan Rang still managed to suppress the situation under such harsh conditions. With sufficient defense equipment and his command, the Red Lotus Group didn't get within 100 meters of the city gate for 3 days in a row. Every time they cursed and attacked the city, the Red Lotus Group could only leave behind hundreds or thousands of corpses. They looked at Jinmen district, which was crawling on the ground, and sighed. In less than 7 or 8 days, the situation in Qingde County had changed several times. First, Jinmen district fell into Jiangpengji's hands. Then, Honglian district was conquered by the second-in-command of the Red Lotus Group. After that, the rebel army of the Red Lotus Group intended to encroach on Qiuyu district. They used their identities as the left and right protectors of the Red Lotus Group to deceive the guards into opening the city gate, killing them unexpectedly. They originally thought that the Red Lotus Group and Lu Shi would each occupy one district in Qingde County, and the rebel army would occupy 2. Who would have thought that in just a day, the situation would undergo an earth-shattering change? Lu Shi conquered another city, and Honglian district was in his hands. Compared to Jinmen district, Honglian district was almost a piece of cake. The main reason was that An Shui had arranged for an informant to receive them. Although An Shui's sworn brother wasn't very cultured, he was smart and obedient. He obediently carried out An Shui's plan. On one hand, he got the leader of the city guards drunk in the name of a banquet, and on the other, he took the opportunity to bribe the guards at the city gate. Taking advantage of the darkness of the night, he quietly opened the city gates and lured Jiangpengji into the city. Those who were completely drunk were either tied up in their sleep, or had their heads chopped off and died on the spot. When the people in the city woke up, they realized that the flag on the city gate had been changed. Jiangpengji had taken over Honglian district and deliberately blocked the news. The Red Lotus Group, which was staging a civil war inside and outside the city walls of Qiuyu district, had no idea. The plan is going well. Have the scouts returned yet? She had taken over half of Qingde County's territory, and she was only 2 counties away from unifying Wanzhou. He's already back. This is the news gathered by the scouts. Fenghu County is now strong on the outside but weak on the inside. It seems to be heavily guarded, but in fact, it's very weak. Yang Si took out a roll of parchment from his sleeve and handed it to Jiangpengji. Does my lord want to take down Fenghu County in one go, or do you want to delay it for a day or 2? The soldiers have been marching day and night and are extremely tired. For the sake of combat strength, I suggest that we rest for a day. Jiangpengji's battle rhythm was rather fast, but it didn't mean that she didn't know her limits. Her physical strength could keep up, and she was still alive and kicking after a few days, but those soldiers were different. For the past few days, they had spent practically all of their time in the midst of a rapid march. Even their sleep and rest had to be taken advantage of. They were truly exhausted. Let's rest for a day. Jiangpengji said with a smile, speaking of which, the new recruits from Fengyi County should be arriving soon. Although they've only trained for a month or 2, they can still be put to good use. By the way, who's the leader? Yang Si said, Zixiao. Hearing this name, Jiangpengji frowned and said, his health isn't good. Why is he running around in the middle of winter? Yang Si didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Although Zixiao's body is cold, he's good at the art of Qihuang and has a lot of experience in recuperating. After recuperating for a few years, his current condition is far better than before. Don't be fooled by his frail appearance, he's not that weak inside. He's not weak in riding and archery at all. He's good at riding a horse and drawing a bow. My lord always says that he's physically weak. Actually, men don't like to hear this. Yang Si wasn't a serious person. The last sentence didn't sound like much, but an experienced person could understand the meaning behind it. However, Jiang Pengji said, "I know." Yang Si was surprised. Since the Lord knew that Wei Si's health wasn't that bad, why did she remind him several times? For a strategist, if the Lord used his health as an excuse and repeatedly refused him to make contributions, it would be really hurtful. Jiang Pengji said again, "It's to punish the monkey to warn the chicken." Yang Si was completely dumbfounded. Punish the monkey to warn the chicken? What did she mean? If the live stream was still on at this time, the experienced viewers would probably be delighted to hear it and laugh. How could the streamer's words not be clear? She was obviously spoiling the little princess on purpose and generously showing it to others. This was a mouthful of sweet dog food, and they devoured it. In his previous life, Wei Xi and Qiguan Rang had been officials of the same court for more than 10 years. He also had a certain understanding of the latter. Knowing that the person guarding the city was Qiguan Rang, Wei Xi already had a plan in mind to cooperate with the encirclement and suppression. He brought more than 5,000 new recruits, and Qiguan Rang had 5,000 to 6,000 veterans in the city. There were more than 10,000 people in total. The Red Lotus Group, which was shouting outside the city, had more than 36,000 people. Under Qiguan Rang's attrition, there were only slightly more than 30,000 left. If they attacked from the front and rear and caught them off guard, they might be able to defeat 30,000 enemies with just over 10,000 troops. Wei Xi lowered his eyes and thought about it carefully. This plan was feasible. The Red Lotus Group was just a cult among the people. They lacked cohesion, and with Jiang Pengji's several blows, their morale had fallen to rock bottom. They did not have the determination to fight to the death. On the contrary, if they saw that the situation was not good, they would break into a run. In addition, Qiguan Rang was firmly guarding Jinmen district. A few days of forceful attacks had not been effective. Instead, they had suffered heavy losses. The morale of the army was already lax, and their combat power was not enough to be feared. If they gave the other party a head-on blow at this time, they would definitely be able to completely destroy the morale of the Red Lotus Group. As long as their military formation was completely disrupted and they flew around randomly like headless flies, they would definitely win this battle. Although Qiguan Rang's battle results were fruitful, only he knew how difficult it was inside. He did not dare to close his eyes and sleep for a few days, for fear that the Red Lotus Group outside would attack the city crazily while he slept soundly. The 30,000 troops were 6 times the number of soldiers in the city. He calculated the time and felt that he would be liberated in another day or two. Su Ku was a steady person. If he sent new recruits to battle, the leader would definitely be one of the few strategists in Fengyi County. Although Jiang Pengji's territory was not large, there were many top-notch talents, and some were partial. No matter who came, it would be a boost to Qiguan Rang's morale. Sure enough, at noon the next day, the reinforcements finally arrived. The Red Lotus Group was still shouting and provoking below the city walls. They cursed until their throats were swollen. In the end, they could not wait any longer and chose to attack. Qiguan Rang stood on the city wall and looked into the distance. He vaguely saw that there was an unusual movement behind the Red Lotus Group's army. His eyes were filled with warmth. In order to show their strength and reduce the threat of the ballistae on the city wall, the Red Lotus Group had deliberately set up a large battle formation. However, this had also caused a certain delay in the transmission of their information. It was not until the sand and dust were flying in the air behind them, the shouts of killing shook the heavens, and the casualties were heavy that the Red Lotus Group at the front realized that something was wrong. At this moment, Qiguan Rang sneered. Chapter 647. The flames of war spread and dust flew everywhere. The war drums rumbled like thunder, and murderous shouts resounded through the heavens. The Red Lotus group had suffered several setbacks. After splitting up their troops, they had suffered repeated losses outside Jinmen County. Their morale was low, and their will to fight was sparse. A group of enemies appeared out of nowhere and launched a sneak attack on the rear of the Red Lotus group. Qiguan Rang, who was in Jinmen County, immediately gave the order to open the city gates and send out troops to meet the Red Lotus group. This would restrain the main force at the front, making it impossible for them to take care of both the front and the rear. Under Qiguan Rang's command, the soldiers formed a military formation to break up the Red Lotus group's formation and surround and kill them. If the Red Lotus group counterattacked, they would scatter and not gather. Under Qiguan Rang's command, the Red Lotus group felt that their enemy was like a piece of sticky candy that could not be removed. Most of the main forces of the Red Lotus group were gathered at the front. Qiguan Rang stuck to them like a piece of candy, making it difficult for them to turn around and return to support the rear. Compared to Qiguan Rang's roundabout gentleness, Wei Xi appeared firm and decisive. Because of Jiang Pengji's strict control, the first thing the recruits received after entering the camp was not physical training, but how to carry out orders. Therefore, even though the people Wei Xi brought were all new recruits, they carried out his orders relatively well. Even if their physical fitness and combat qualities could not be compared to the veterans, the new recruits were much stronger than the Red Lotus group members who panicked and were at a loss when they were ambushed. Wei Xi knew very well that Qiguan Rang was holding back the main force of the Red Lotus group, buying him precious time. The faster he killed, the more losses the Red Lotus group would suffer, and the less pressure Qiguan Rang would face. Therefore, in order to further expand the battle results, Wei Xi chose a rather tough offensive formation. The vanguard was like an awl, sharp and swift. It broke through and severed the already chaotic rear of the Red Lotus group. The arrangement of the soldiers on the two flanks leaned towards defense. They were strong and powerful, taking into account speed and protecting the center of the army. At the same time, they could maximize the results of the battle and reap the lives of the Red Lotus group. The archers and pikemen were in the middle, supporting the front and two flanks, shooting the enemies and clearing the obstacles. The army led by Wei Xi was like a pair of long scissors, easily tearing apart the rear of the Red Lotus group, making it impossible for the two wings to support and cooperate. Swords and sabers flashed, and arrows rained down like a tide. One by one, the corpses fell to the ground. As far as the eyes could see, there were severed limbs and broken bones. The military strength in Jinmen County, including the recruits that Wei Xi had brought with him, totaled more than 10,000. The Red Lotus group still outnumbered them by 3 times. However, how could a place like the battlefield be won by having more people? With Wei Xi's attack and Qiguan Rang's containment, the Red Lotus group suffered heavy casualties. The morale of the army was slack, and they were in disarray. They tried to make a last-ditch effort to break out of the encirclement. However, Wei Xi and Qiguan Rang's cooperation was rather tacit. The latter turned from restraining the enemy to encircling them, while the former turned from attacking to driving them away. The two of them were like experienced fishermen, and the soldiers they commanded were the sturdy fishing nets they had woven. The two of them did not communicate, but their hearts were in sync. They drove the panicking Red Lotus group, the big and small fishes, to one place, and finally drew in the net. Captive. It was not until the setting sun shone on half of the horizon that Qiguan Rang reluctantly ordered his men to retreat. I thought that the person who came would be Zhi. Although Feng Zhen was a prodigal son and did not have a good relationship with Feng Jin, Su Ku, and the others, Qiguan Rang quite admired this guy. According to his temperament and style, he was quite suitable to lead the recruits to support Jinmen County. He had never expected that the last person to arrive would be Wei Xi. Thinking about Wei Xi's usual style, it was very different from his style on the battlefield just now. Qiguan Rang could not help but re-examine this gentle and weak colleague. You've hidden yourself well, big brother. Wei Ci was still afraid of the cold, so he wore a few more layers than others. He also wrapped himself in a windproof cloak made of rabbit fur. From afar, he looked like a snowball. Just like how Yang Si felt cold when he looked at Qiguan Rang also felt a little hot when he looked at Wei Ci. After hearing Qiguan Rang's words, Wei Ci smiled and coughed twice. Zi Shi is busy and far away in Shangyang County, presiding over the overall situation with Huayu. Going back and forth is a waste of time, and I'm afraid that it will delay the Lord's great plan. Helpless, I, an idle person with nothing to do, will help the Lord solve her worries. This was not the case. In the beginning, Fengzhen had been eager to come. How could exhausting government affairs be as refreshing as fighting a war? However, Wei Ci had a white face and a black heart. He was good at tricking his friends. From Zhangping, Yang Si, to Fengzhen, when had he ever been merciful? Where is the Lord now? Wei Ci had also rushed here overnight. He had no spare time to inquire about information. Qiguan Rang briefly explained the current situation on the battlefield. Jinmen County had been defended, and Honglian County could probably be deceived. Coincidentally, Wei Ci had arrived, so he could lead the troops there to defend. The Red Lotus Group was having a civil war in Qiuyu County. Jiang Pengji and Qiguan Rang had deliberately blocked the news, so they would not know about the changes here for the time being. Jiang Pengji could use this time gap to turn around and attack Fenghu County. When the three counties were stabilized, she would return to deal with the remaining troops of the Red Lotus Group. Wei Ci kept a gentle expression and listened carefully. In his previous life, he had moved from Lengjia County to Zhongzhao's Bianzhou with the Wei family. As an invisible person, he was not valued, so he simply built a hut and lived in seclusion. He was still concerned about the affairs of the world, but most of the news came from Zhongzhao. As for the news of Dongqing, he only had a general idea. Perhaps the evildoer mentioned by monk Liaochen was causing trouble, stealing the fate of Dongqing and the vitality of the people, causing many things to happen in advance. In his previous life, the Red Lotus Group had surfaced much later than it was now. The Red Lotus Group had been preaching in the north for several years. It had accumulated countless loyal followers, and its followers were widely distributed. In the end, the leader of the Red Lotus Group took advantage of the situation and revolted. He received the support of the people in the north, and the imperial court could not shake him. He suffered several losses, and the Tsing-Yi army, who revolted at the same time, could only avoid him. The current Red Lotus Group was still immature, and its teachings were not deeply rooted in the people's hearts. Otherwise, it would not have been easy to take Chengde County. Did the Lord go to Qiuyu County? Wei Ci asked. Qiguan Rang replied, according to the time, that should be the case. Zixiao, fortunately, you came. Otherwise, I would be really busy. Although the Red Lotus Group is a motley crew, their ability to bewitch the people is not weak. In the past few days of defending the city, people have repeatedly tried to attack or bribe the guards at the city gate. On the surface, we have caught more than 22 of them, and there are even more who have not taken action in the dark. Wei Ci rubbed his eyebrows. It's best not to keep these stubborn followers around, lest they spoil our plans. A rat's droppings can spoil a whole pot of porridge. Who knows when these foolish people, whose brains have been brainwashed, will cause a disaster. The Red Lotus Group should indeed be eliminated. Thinking of his previous life, Wei Ci's expression became inexplicably gloomy. There was a hidden murderous intent in his eyes, and even his gentle face turned cold. Understanding the meaning of Wei Ci's words, Qiguan Rang frowned slightly. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.